Welcome to the school committee meeting of Thursday, November 12th, 2020. This is a Zoom meeting with the ongoing COVID pandemic. We're meeting remotely. If you wish to put a question into the Q&A, just make sure you put your name and address first and then ask your question. We will get to it in a timely manner. This meeting is also broadcast on ECAT, Facebook Live, and I believe that is it. We do all votes by roll call. All right, good evening, everyone. The first thing we're going to do is accept minutes. First one, September 10th, 2020. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections? Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of Thursday, September 10th, 2020?
Wiseman, so moved.
Second.
O'Neill, second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durance, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you very much. Our next minutes are September 24th. Are there any comments, questions, or corrections? Caroline.
So on page 1, under the vote to approve physical education, health, and wellness guideline plans, I think it's the 7th line, 6th sentence. Basically, as Mrs. O'Neill said, there have been several discussions about 6 feet. I think it wasn't, I mean, that's a little vague because it's actually what I was referring to was considerable research indicating that 6 feet is not sufficient spacing. So could we just change that to Mrs. O'Neill said there has been considerable research indicating that 6 feet is not sufficient spacing indoors without masks. I mean, that's, let's see, that was the physical education, yes, without masks.
Okay.
And then on page 3, under the reopening update, line, well, it's like sentence 2. I'm just a little unclear about what this means. I don't have a clear recollection of what, you know, the direction of the discussion was, but it just, I have here at capacity and have gone through, this was something that Dr. Cabral was saying, have gone through cohort A and cohort B. Was the intent to say that both cohorts had had an opportunity to meet and that assignments, or was it some other reference?
Because they started, well, no, at that point, no. They were supposed to start on the 17th.
Okay, so what does that sentence mean then? Unfortunately, I had to write it down and I don't have, I'm on the device that has my minutes, but there was the exact quote was at capacity and have gone through cohort A and cohort B. And I was questioning the meaning in that context of have gone through cohort A and cohort B. Does anybody see that?
Mean that we had completed
sentence.
1 week of each of them?
Well, that's what I was suggesting, but Nancy said we hadn't yet, so I don't know.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, September 24th and 25th were the first 2 days in school for cohort B, and then the following Monday and Tuesday would have been the first in person for cohort A.
No.
Oh, we started the 17th.
Yes, we started the 17th.
Not at the middle school and the high school because you were waiting for the air filters.
Right, but we started everywhere else.
Right, but they were still in cohorts, right, at the middle school and high school, even though
Yes.
they were remote? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you did mean that that both cohorts had had an opportunity to meet. I was just questioning, you know, that it seemed a little vague to say have gone through cohort A and cohort B. I mean, it didn't really make sense. So I'm just suggesting that just be changed to both cohort A and cohort B had had an opportunity to meet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, and then on Oh, okay, I'm on the next set. So that's all I have right now for that set of minutes.
Are there any other comments, questions, or corrections? Okay, do I have a motion to accept the school committee meeting minutes of Thursday, September 24th, 2020?
So moved.
O'Neill so moved, but with the changes?
With corrections, okay.
Right, with corrections.
All right, and a second?
Durant, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thank you. Next minutes are Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Any comments, questions, or corrections? All right, I don't see any. Do I have a motion to accept the school committee meeting minutes of Thursday, October 8th, 2020?
Star, so moved.
And I
O'Neill
have,
second.
thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. And finally, the Easton School Committee meeting minutes of Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. Any comments, questions, or corrections?
Nancy, I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. Page 2, third paragraph, fourth sentence. This is just, Mrs. O'Neill stated that she has an issue with 10 feet indoors. I'd just like to add without masks. I don't have an issue with 10 feet generally. I just do with without masks. So I'd like to add without masks to that. On page 2 to 3, the kind of the end of page 2, going over to page 3, she noted that the district is, this is from Dr. Cabral. She noted the district is working on collaborating with the conservation behind the middle school, having groups, et cetera, walk through the conservation. I'm assuming we want two different things there. First of all, I think it's conservation land we're referring to, correct? I mean, it's not the conservation.
Correct.
But also the collaborating, you said we're working on collaborating with, is it NRT or with the Conservation Commission or with whom to make use of the conservation land behind?
The Conservation Commission.
Okay, so then we would say she noted that the district is working on collaborating with the Conservation Commission.
It actually,
regarding, oh, okay.
it was actually NRT was collaborating with them because they're
Okay.
going to be taking the groups onto that property.
Okay, so.
But it's the,
So maybe Leisha, you'd like to reword that whole sentence then, because it's not, I just, first of all, I know it's conservation land. I know we meant to say that. So that was a little unclear, you know, just for someone who might be reading that, we certainly knew it was conservation land, but I mean, I'm assuming you mean that there's a collaboration between NRT and the Conservation Commission to allow use of the conservation land behind the middle school, et cetera, having groups walk through the conservation land. Is that, or something like that? I don't have the full thing in front
yes,
of me.
no, that
because
is
as I said-
correct. And just as a side note, we have started that and it's been very successful and the children are enjoying it a great deal.
So if we could just change it then to, she noted there is a collaboration between NRT and the Conservation Commission regarding use of the conservation land behind the middle school, et cetera, that would allow groups to walk through the conservation land and what as a learning opportunity. How would you like to end that? I don't have the whole thing in front of me, as I said, because my minutes are in the device I'm using. So.
Right, as a part of the science programming that they are participating in with the NRT.
Okay, great. That's good. Thank you. And then on page 3 at the end, I'm just a little confused about this. And again, Dr. Cabral, this would go to you. It says she said the classrooms weren't allowed to have desks 6 feet apart. That's literally what it says. I think the intent was to say some classrooms do not allow 4 6-foot spacing between desks or among desks. I'm not sure. Can you see the minutes at all? I mean, it's very vague to say, the exact quote is, she said the classrooms weren't allowed to have desks 6 feet apart. That
She as in
doesn't-
me?
Yeah, I think that was you. Let me just double check here if I can get it on my phone. Let's see.
It's
We are,
said the classrooms weren't allowed to have desks 6 feet apart.
yeah,
What you're looking at?
but that does, yeah, but that, I'm not sure that makes sense. We're on the 22nd. Okay.
Well, the sentence before that said, she said the leadership team is still gathering the classroom data and looking into other spaces that could potentially be used as classrooms. However,
Okay.
if they do that, they would need more staff, and the district does not have funds for staffing. So I believe it means the physical space of the classroom wouldn't allow desks 6 feet apart.
Yeah, I think that is what it means, that at least for some classrooms. Wasn't it that to say some classrooms would not allow for 6 foot or wouldn't accommodate 6 feet of
I
spacing
found
between-
it.
Yeah. I just think that question of.
Less than 6 feet apart. The classrooms cannot have desks less than 6
Oh,
feet.
less than, okay, good. Okay, that just clarifies it, excellent. And then on page 4, the second sentence, you were referring to, basically the tremendous challenges for teachers, but you said and you were talking about the principals putting measures in place. It says, she said they are trying to elevate the load on staff. I think you meant ameliorate or minimize or mitigate, something like that.
Alleviate.
But elevate is not.
Alleviate.
Alleviate. Okay, so alleviate. Good. And then on page 4, the 4th line, first paragraph, it said that Easton would not pass an audit with the remote learning on Wednesdays. Is that really what the case was? I thought we were kind of saying that we had sufficient, that our adherence to the guidelines was sufficient at this point that we would pass an audit. So did I may be just misremembering the conversation.
I'm sorry, can you tell me where that is again?
Oh,
You said the
sorry.
first
Same
one?
paragraph.
Page 4, yeah. 4th line, first
Oh, wouldn't-
first paragraph,
okay, I see
4th
it.
line. She added that Easton would not pass an audit. I honestly don't recall that discussion with the level of detail that would be necessary to remember exactly what you intended to say, but my recollection of much of the discussion had to do with the fact that we probably would not be
Right, because we are
identified for
working
audit.
remotely on Wednesdays. We are not doing it asynchronously, so we would pass an audit.
Yes, so that's what I thought, that you said we would. So since it says we would not, I think we need to change that to, given our current configuration or our current model, we would pass an audit. Does that make sense? And then the last thing, is that in the same section? I apologize for not having, it's the fact that the minutes are in the wrong place for me, but Mrs. O'Neill expressed her concern to go to 3 feet. I think it was just saying about going to 3 feet. I didn't express a concern to go to 3 feet. I mean, that sounded like I almost wanted us to go to 3 feet, which is not at all the case. So I just would like to change that to about going to 3 feet.
Okay. All right.
Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway,
Anything else?
sorry. Is there anything else that?
Do you have anything else in this
Nope.
group? No? How about anybody else? Anyone else? All right, I'll make a motion to accept the Easton School Committee meetings minutes of Thursday, October 22nd, 2020 with corrections. Do I have a second?
Second. Durant, second.
Do all those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Vote to approve marathon physical therapy athletic trainer contract. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. Director of Operations, David Twombly is here this evening to, as usual, he explains the contracts to you for your consideration. This one is for Marathon Physical Therapy, which provides our athletic trainer services. Mr. Twombly?
Yep. So, how's everybody doing? Hope everybody's doing well. But so, anyways, this is our athletic trainer contract. It's a 3-year contract. The cost is $36,000 per year. The cost went up about $2,100 from the previous year, from 2019 to 20. So it's went up about $2,100 for the contract. We followed all the procurement laws as far as Chapter 30B. Again, it would be a 3-year contract, and the $36,000 stays consistent throughout the 3 years of the contract. So a motion to approve the marathon physical therapy contract would be in order. Unless there's questions, of course.
Michelle, go ahead.
So my question has to do with, I understand that it's equal payments, but we're not using them to the degree that we normally would be using them this year.
That's a good question. Yeah, we definitely had reduced, obviously reduced down in September, and they're going to have the additional season, I think, in March. But then again, there are some additional work that has to be done as far as COVID. That's COVID related. So it's a really good question, but I mean, that's what it is right now. It's $36,000 for the year. Again, they only went up $2,100. It's about a 6% increase.
But our sports program is drastically reduced.
Right. To David's point, instead of having 3 seasons this year, we're going to have 4 seasons. So each season is reduced, but we have an additional, it's called the wedge season, that actually is put in there for some of the spring sports to move more into the winter. And then there are a lot of enhanced COVID related issues this year that, of course, we've never had before that they're dealing with.
What would be an example of that?
We're just dealing with all the PPE requirements and, you know, probably taking students' temperatures. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they have to abide by as far as with the state and DESE. The other thing I would add is that we've had marathon physical therapy for the last several years. So they're familiar with our athletes, they're familiar with our staff, they're familiar, obviously, with the students as far as any previous injuries. So I think it's a good relationship that we have with them. But I hear what you're saying as far as, like, on the surface, it may appear to be less work, but it really is just it's probably just as much, like Alicia was saying, is the wedge season. But in addition to that, there is additional requirements for this season as far as making sure the students are following the appropriate protocols.
There's also, so they have to assess students who may be ill as well. I don't know if you remember the medical waiting rooms that we have for all of the nurses. We have to turn one of the training areas into a medical waiting room. And so just like our nurses do during the school day, they have to send and sometimes dismiss students who may be participating in activity that may be suspect of having COVID, things like that. So it's very different than last year, for example.
Caroline?
So I'm just wondering though, I mean, sadly, given the sort of skyrocketing infection rate across the country, can we even be certain we would have those additional seasons, the wedge season, for example? I mean, what would happen if we couldn't, if athletic activities were put completely on hold, which is not out of the realm of possibility, although that's certainly not something I'd like to see happen at all. But what would happen if we literally didn't have any work for the athletic trainers during a portion of the year?
We could either use them for other services like practices, things of that nature, or we could have a conversation with them similar to the one we had with transportation last year. Of course, we don't know, so we haven't negotiated that yet. We don't know if we'll be in school or if we'll have the seasons, but we have them, we would if you approve this, we will have them contracted if we do have seasons.
So what happened? Did we pay them the full contracted amount last year when there was no spring season at all? And then
No, we
nobody was in the school?
No.
No, we did not.
We didn't pay them for that portion. Okay, so this could
only
still be,
person-
like, we make the contract, but then it could be adjusted seeing where COVID goes, right? Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
there's an actual law. It's chapter 41, section 56 in the Mass General Laws that basically requires you to render services before you get paid. So if they're not rendering us services, then we don't have to necessarily pay them.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
but,
Caroline?
well, the operative word there though, David, was necessarily, because, you know, obviously we did end up negotiating an agreement with the bus company, for example, that we did pay them a portion of services not rendered. So, I mean, we really had no choice, given that we need to maintain a busing contract, but this seems a little different. So is there anything, honestly, I have to tell you that I didn't get through all of that contract. I was so busy with all the minutes we got. Is there any sort of reference to the possibility of, you know, this would only be if a certain number of hours or certain services were provided, or are we essentially on the hook for the funds for the
No,
payout
it's
regardless?
based on an average number of hours, and so you estimate what you think your projected hours are. The athletic trainer, contract is based on 1,200 hours. So you pay for the services of the number of hours, but you have to give them an estimate of the number of hours that you feel that they will need so that they have the appropriate staff dedicated to service your district.
Okay, I'm still a little unclear. So if for some reason, which again, I so do not hope that this happens, I really want our kids to be able to participate in all of their activities, and certainly sports is among them. But if for some reason they were only able to provide, say, 600 hours of service, we're still on the hook for the 36,000.
No, we meet with
no?
we meet with them like we did with transportation, and we negotiate a rate based on the services that were rendered. We didn't pay our transportation for services that weren't rendered. We paid for the continuation of services that we wanted continued. For example, the insurance of the vehicles, the maintenance of the fleet. Those are buses that we use every year. So we were able to pay them for those services. We did not pay for labor for bus drivers, for example. That's why we had to negotiate it, because we have to go through all of the line items and determine what was a service and what was not a service.
Oh, that was very helpful. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? All right, do I have a motion to accept the contract with Marathon Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine for a 3-year contract?
So moved, O'Neill.
And I need a second.
Star, second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes. Star, yes.
Those opposed? Okay. Thank you. All right. Next up is vote to approve Bill's taxi homeless transportation contract. Dr. Cabral.
Okay, so this is another contract set up for contracted services for transportation. So transportation has been an issue for us for special education and special services. And David Twombly will explain the creative problem solving we have done to try to contract with another service provider for this.
Yeah, so as you know, VHS Transportation, which is located right here in Easton, they're our current vendor for special education transportation. However, due to the pandemic, in the de-densifying of the vehicles, they've had to get more drivers and more vehicles. However, to get drivers across the entire United States, including Massachusetts, is very difficult to get extra drivers. In fact, it's very difficult to get any kind of, I would say, substitutes or drivers. I mean, some of those specialty areas, it's really difficult to get those types of folks. So anyways, what we had to do, because VHS was unable to get drivers, we had to reach out to Bill's Taxi. And actually, Bill's Taxi, from what I've heard, talking to people in our office, they have provided these services in the past years ago. So we approached them. They were very accommodating. We worked very closely with them. We also worked with the town. We worked with our insurance company to make sure that Bill's Taxi had the appropriate insurance levels. We also worked with our town attorney from Jay Talaman's office, who helped me create the contract. So there's a couple extra hoops we had to go through, but at the end of the day, we were able to come to a conclusion on the contract. So what we're looking to do is to enter into a contract, a one-year contract, just for this academic year with Bill's Taxi Service to transport special needs students. Just for this year, they're actually doing us a favor, or they're helping us out in a kind of, I wouldn't say a crisis, but in a situation as far as with this pandemic.
It's not all of our special education students. It's just overflow that our vendor, our already approved vendor, is unable to service.
Yeah, they're only
lack
transporting
of
about 4
vehicles.
or 5 students
Mhm.
this year, right now. I mean, that could grow a little bit, or that could decrease depending if we were to go to remote or something. But right now, they're only transporting 4 or 5 students.
And Michelle, go ahead.
Is this like van style? I mean, the name's a little deceiving.
Yeah, so they have vans. They do a lot of charter service, and they do a lot of limousine service. So these would be like compact cars, and also would be vans that meet the requirements.
Would there be monitors?
If we needed monitors, we could get a monitor.
Yeah, monitors are provided on the basis of a student's IEP. There aren't monitors on every van or bus.
So is there potentially a car that's going to have a driver and a student in it, and that's it?
Yes,
Yep. That's how VHS is now.
we
Because
have that now.
Yeah, because some of they had to de-densify the van, so sometimes there's only 1 or 2 students on a van.
Michelle, I looked up the company, and they do student transportation is a normal part of it, because I was thrown by the name as well. Student transportation using the normal type of vehicles that we would see for student transportation is a normal part of their operating business.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not really
That they're
you know,
flagging
a taxi
taxis or
showing
something.
up, yeah, to drive a student to school. No, it's not that.
Okay,
I had the
thank
same
you.
concern.
Well, like I said, they're doing us, you know, they're actually been very cooperative, and they're helping out, especially with VHS. Again, it's very difficult to get certain workers, especially drivers in particular, because a lot of the drivers are retired people, so they don't want to drive in these conditions. The other thing, just so that you know, Michelle, every driver that works for the district, we do a query and a fingerprint on all those drivers.
Yeah,
Are
it's a great
these-
point, because you know, it's not easy to enter into agreements with transportation vendors unless they have experience with the school sector, because our requirements are far more strict than just a normal public transportation. So they have to enter into very specific contract negotiations, insurance that is outside of public transportation. They have to be fingerprinted, as Mr. Twombly said. It's extremely challenging for your average transportation system to transport students. The trainings required, the policies required. And so we were very fortunate to be able to work this out effectively with this vendor. So yeah, don't let the name throw you.
Are these vehicles equipped if a child required a harness or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And like Lisa said, they had to meet stringent insurance requirements. So again, we work with our insurer, Meyer Insurance, or Cabot, and they had to meet those thresholds. That was a big part of this contract negotiation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to accept the Bill's Taxi Service Incorporated contract for 2021.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Star
O'Neill?
second.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. Okay, next is vote to revise fundraising and acceptance of grants and gifts policy JJE second reading. So this came up at our last meeting. We had some faculty members that are interested in using donors choose. And in our policy, it said you could not use any, what was it?
Donors choose in particular.
Right, and well, yeah, okay, so online stuff. Anyway, Jackie Wiseman came up with a list of, well, an addition to the policy, and you should have all gotten that. And Jackie, do you want to speak to it since you wrote this? It's wonderful.
Sure. So I did a little research just to see if other districts had policies on the crowdfunding, I think they called. And I found a couple of policies that had been written. Most of them were for multiple types of sites, and I just kind of picked out for donors choose since that was the one that we were focusing on. Jen, I did get your corrections as well, so thank you very much. I also tried to incorporate the comments from our last meeting, which where we were talking about, a specific teacher may not know if certain items are available either somewhere else in their building or somewhere else in the district. So it was important for the building principal and the assistant superintendent to be in the loop as well. The one other thing that came up in my research was that sometimes these types of programs can cause some inequities between classrooms. For example, if one particular teacher is comfortable, doing this, it's a lot of work, and it's all online. So maybe another teacher isn't quite as comfortable. But I felt pretty comfortable thinking that if that was the case, a teacher could always go to the building principal, and I'm sure there would be somebody else in the district or in their building to help them with this. So I didn't really think that would be a problem in our district. But I do think that having the building principal and the assistant superintendent in the loop will kind of help not only streamline this, but if there's certain, like we said, items that may be available somewhere else, or maybe there's a piece of technology that they're interested in, but it's not compatible. Those are all issues that I think were very valid. So I just kind of put this together based on what I had read and based on our comments, and I'm happy to take any comments or suggestions or edits.
Well, I know on the bottom, one of the questions that you asked is, do we allow projects to be advertised online, or are they through the district or through the individual school website? And I wasn't sure about that, about, how we felt about that.
Yeah, some districts allowed them to put these projects on the district website. Some didn't. Some allowed Facebook. Some were hesitant about that. I don't know if we want to get involved in that part of it or not. I'm kind of open to suggestions on that.
Michelle?
I don't see why we would take a stance on that. I mean, that's a really good mode of advertising your project. You're still running under the regulations of GoFundMe, and it's already been approved by at least an administrator. That's a really good way to get out to local community businesses and people who might be looking for tax write-offs and to fund a project. I don't see a negative to that.
Okay,
Yes,
so
Michelle?
just to be clear, Michelle, this is
Yep.
donors' choice, and in our policy, GoFundMe is not allowed. GoFundMe is not.
Right. Donors choose. That's what I meant to say. If I said GoFundMe, I didn't mean that.
Okay, because I get confused on
No,
all these.
donors choose. But the question was about whether we were allowing them
Right,
to promote it on social media.
okay,
And you
Yeah.
would post it. It would be like if you posted an event to whatever. It's a
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to promote it is a key part of the success of any of these campaigns. So
Exactly.
if we have any, you know, if we get too far into the weeds on where you can and can't promote, you're kind of hamstringing the whole point of having this type of thing, which is to spread and share. And, you know I participated in a GoFundMe for a friend's sister in, New York. And, she got $1,500 in a matter of 5 hours and was able to get the piece of equipment she needed for her classroom. So yeah, being able to spread far and wide is how this works essentially.
Yeah, and that was a very interesting piece of it that I hadn't thought about. It's really not, it's really not just the classroom that's supporting it. It could be people from anywhere, which I think is a really great opportunity through this.
Caroline?
Well, first of all, I just did want to say thank you so much to Jackie, because I know she put I know that it's a relatively short section of the proposed change is a relatively short, section of the policy, which we hope to add to the policy. But I know that she put a great deal of work into this, including doing a lot of research. I just have one super minor proposed edit, which is on number 5, the second sentence. I think you need an apostrophe between R and S, educators.
Yes, Jen already got me on that.
Oh, I'm sure she did. Well, I wasn't sure that you were saying you took all her comments into account, because she provided a lot of helpful ideas last time at our meeting. So I wasn't sure whether you meant, since you made that available to us, or previous comments. So but I thought Jen probably already got that, if that's what she was talking about.
I know possessive.
There's
And then
another one that you missed too, Caroline, that Jen got. So
Oh, I'm sure there were. Well, as I said, I was trying to get through. That was a pretty big minute dump. It's like the vote dump, the minutes.
Yeah,
minutes
credit
dump.
to Lynn. That must have been a ton of
that
work.
So that's what was taking my time.
So will this policy go on section 1A? It's like the 8th, I don't know, 1, 2, 6, 7, the 8th one, where it says the use of online fundraising sites. This will be in with that to give the, we're not using GoFundMe, but we're using Donors Choose, correct?
yeah, so I started it with the use of online fundraising sites, GoFundMe, blah, 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 except
So
it's
I just
added below. Yeah.
Right. Okay, just wanted to double check.
And
All
Lynn,
right.
I'll make those 2 corrections and I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions or comments or anything? Go ahead, Caroline.
This essentially is a first reading of the policy change, right? So even
Second.
Oh, it is the second reading. So can we approve it with the changes then?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just didn't know.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I'm going to make a motion to accept the fundraising policy correction on JJE with the corrections.
Second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
And thank you again, Jackie. You did a great job. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Next is discussion regarding physical spaces and potential return of remote students. Dr. Cabral.
Chair, I think Assistant Superintendent
Chrissy
Chrissy
Pruitt.
Pruitt has a comment, if you want to allow that before I begin.
I would love to allow that. Go ahead, Mrs. Pruitt.
I would just like to remind the audience that if you type in a comment or a question, please type in your address. We do have a comment in the Q&A, but there's no address, so it cannot be read yet.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. So we started a conversation a few weeks ago about physical spaces and returning to school. And the reason for that is because we did put out a plan with 5 phases that were entirely contingent upon where we would be with the virus at any moment in time. The beginning of the plan has a full page disclosure for that purpose. I'm pretty sure everybody completely understands that depending on where our cases are, it's really going to have a huge impact on even our best of intentions on what we would like to do, on what we'd want to do, or even what we don't want to do, but with the goal of keeping everyone safe. And a couple of events have taken place in the last couple of weeks that are timely in our conversation. One is the governor's statements. Another is the Mass Association of School Superintendents memo regarding that. And then finally, there was a governor press conference again today, pretty much on these topics of physical spaces and returning students to school. So I just wanted to give people an update of where we are at, our continued conversations about this. A lot of it is repetitive, so I do apologize for that. But if anything, hopefully it's validating in the sense that we are holding the line on our most important priorities. I will say, if we look back, whether it's at the plan or conversations that we had, that our number one promise and commitment to this community was the safety and wellness of every student and every staff member. Now we are a couple of months into school, and I will say that all of our data has substantiated that we are in a very good place right now. We, in relation to other school districts in the Commonwealth, and we in relation to even the town of Easton, have quite low numbers. And any case we have had, we have been able to identify that it was contracted outside of school. And so we have zero evidence of in-school transmission. Now, with that said, the governor and commissioner of education have very strongly announced that they would like all students to be back in school full-time, if feasible. Of course, we wholeheartedly agree. We want children in school. Our staff want children in school. We want all our kids back in school. No one, I don't think anyone believes, no one that I've spoken to believes that this is the perfect solution. We have heard that it is imperfect. We have heard that it is unsustainable. Of course, both of those things are true. But it's important to remember that none of this planning has ever been intended to be perfect or sustainable. We're in a pandemic. We're in a crisis. We're doing the very best we can to offer a rigorous and engaging education in a completely safe environment. And in a pandemic, that is a challenge. But I do believe that our protocols, our practices, and our procedures has brought us to where we are today. Many people have commented that all students should be back in school immediately. We're pleased, of course, that that is the belief. We are taking the approach that people want their children back in school, whether they were fully remote or whether they're just one cohort and they want them back as many days as possible, because they do have confidence in the procedures and practices and protocols that we have put in place to keep their children safe. We have already, to this point, investigated many different options. We're aware of all of the options in the state. We chose our protocol very purposefully, based on our populations, based on our facilities, based on our resources, based on our capacity, which is going to be different than many other districts. Some of the ideas that people have sent our way, we have vetted already. Some of them we've spoken about here. I understand completely that some of them seem a lot easier than others to implement. We don't, in these meetings, tend to get into the very minutia of all that is required to make something like this work in this safe environment. But I would like to address some of them just so people have some context in what some of the problem solving we're currently working on and why it's not as cut and dried as someone who's outside of a district may realize. And I can certainly understand things like, why not extend the full day? Why not just add 2 hours to the day? What is the difference? Especially for pre-K to 2 where they already have lunch. Well, for secondary, lunch is an issue. We do have some schools that are more taxed than others in terms of open spaces. They do not have the space to have children 6 feet apart at this point. If we brought back both cohorts of students so that they can safely eat without their masks, even if we do add multiple lunch shifts, which we have also considered. One thing most people may not realize is that when you have a lunch shift, obviously you need to have staff available to supervise those students. And when you have multiple shifts, now you're requiring more staff. And that is not something we have as a viable resource right now in the district. We're having trouble, even with the grant money we have that is set to expire in December, we're having a lot of trouble finding these people. As you heard Mr. Twombly say earlier, many of our traditional pool of substitutes, interns, temps, they typically tend to be either college students or people who are retired or partially retired. Those are populations of people that are particularly reticent to come into a school district right now. Some colleges will not allow their students to go off campus and be part of the school system. For example, they're trying to maintain their own safe protocols within their campus community. People of a certain age or who may have medical predispositions are obviously concerned for putting themselves in harm's way when it's not necessary for them to do so, or may not be recommended by their health service providers. So it has been quite a challenge for us to have enough people to supervise the students that we have. As you spread people out, you need to have more spaces occupied by adults to supervise them. We also do have the continued challenge of the elementary schools that I talked about at our last meeting. Right now, our staff are contractually allowed a certain amount of time for preps to prepare their lessons and for lunches, which they need. Truth be told, they need a lot more preparatory time because they're teaching in a way that they've never taught before. They're using technology and software and programming that they've never used before. And they're splitting up how they're delivering their instruction across cohorts. And some is in person and some is at home and some is independent that students need to work on. And that is extremely challenging to change their entire pedagogical approach. So we would like to find more time for teacher preparation as opposed to reducing it. And if we were to extend the school day, it would reduce their preparatory time, particularly their preparatory time together. This is a perfect example of when that collaborative time as a team is hypercritical. You've got first grade teachers, for example, working in 3 different buildings. It is very advantageous for them to piggyback on the successes of colleagues that are using certain strategies or programs or lessons, and having that time together is very rare in a typical school year because we have to stagger them throughout the day. Now, as the students leave, all of the teachers have their preparation periods at the same time, and it allows them to have that collaboration that is really imperative in this current challenge. And it is something that would be very difficult for them to lose and still provide the level of instruction that they are providing right now, which both Mrs. Pruitt and I feel extremely confident about in terms of the quality. We have colleagues in the state who are being audited because of a lot of their approaches to asynchronous learning or independent learning. We have colleagues who are having to change their model right now based on feedback from the state. We are, the biggest struggle we have is to try to make this as manageable for our professionals as possible. That is a significant issue. However, we strongly believe that the students are getting the very best education that they can under these extraordinary circumstances. We will continue to investigate possibilities to alleviate the stressors that are put on our staff. But what we want to do before we jump into anything is make sure of two very important things. One, that we have thought ahead at all of the possible pitfalls of doing that. What we don't want to do is completely change something on our staff and find out that it's actually more difficult for them. But even more importantly is to make sure that that very staff is safe and our students are safe. And again, that has been our pledge from the beginning. It is something that we feel as though we have been able to deliver and follow through on. And we just want to make sure we're not compromising that. As I said earlier, a lot of people are saying your cases are so low, why don't you just bring everybody back? Well, the same point could be made that our cases are so low because of the protocols we have in place. And so we just want to be cognizant of that before we jump to something different. Certainly, we have also looked at things like half days. We do have colleagues in other parts of the state that have 5 days of instruction for cohort A in the morning, 5 days of instruction in the afternoon. Of course, we've certainly considered that. The superintendents I've spoken to in those districts have, of course, shared their challenges as well. It is a challenge to staff because they're teaching a cohort in the morning, but still needing to provide those remote services for students in the afternoon. So they're double planning for that. And then teaching everything twice. It's 50% of the face time that they have with students. Again, in all fairness, some would argue that it may be more quality because they are working more directly with the students as opposed to having them online. But we have to remember that the remote model that we've chosen in this district is, as of right now, it is better for our kids. Warts and all, as difficult as it has been, as troublesome and distracting as it can be, we are finding that many of our colleagues who purchased remote products for their students to use are extremely dissatisfied with how that is going. They do not have a district teacher working with those students. Much of it is asynchronous and not much live instruction. So they're having a lot of those problems. We also, the superintendents I talked to that were able to do this own their own school buses. So they are able to do as many runs as they want during a day. We do not currently have the budget to double our number of runs. Our current contract is over $1 million. We do not have $1 million. And frankly, our vendor does not have the buses to do it. We currently take up 17 of their buses every day. Each bus is between $7,000 and $8,000 a day to run right now. That doesn't include a second run for everybody. So there are some challenges there as well as with cleaning. So the consensus is that it really is best to thoroughly clean in between different cohorts of children. We do that now on our Wednesdays and weekend cleanings. Districts that have half day morning, half day in the afternoon literally need to clean the entire building in that period between cohorts. whether it's the way we do it with the electrostatic sprayers or whether they do it by hand. We don't have the staff to do that right now. We have physical spaces that are different than theirs. We have schools that are bigger than some of theirs. So it's very difficult to take a plan and just to drop it right into our environment. We really have to look at all of the factors involved and see if what we have in place matches being able to utilize some of the same ideas. So it's not that we are at a lack of creative ideas. We're just still thoroughly vetting them to the best of our ability. We did talk about part of the district going full day once we realized that elementary was really going to be a problem. Because in addition to losing the preparatory periods and for spacing and things like that for elementary, we also had the problem of losing the facilitators for remote learning. And that was something that the elementary educators did not feel was appropriate just yet. Again, we don't want to move to a model that is more difficult for everyone to be able to carry out. At the secondary level, the middle school and the high school utilize the same transportation tier. So we have found that they really would have to move together. The high school is a little bit better poised for it at this point. The middle school is not. The middle school had to completely revamp their schedule to make this model work. And so unlike the high school, which to extend the day would literally just extend the periods, the middle school would have to reallocate students to different classrooms, different teachers, potentially different teams. We have some excellent schedulers, leaders, guidance counselors at the middle school. And I can tell you, they have been working day in and day out on this, and they are extremely challenged to make these kinds of changes. And then, you know, we have to consider if we were to make some really significant changes, which include, you know, staff with different students and kids in different classes halfway through a year and so forth, if we were at some point to go fully remote or even return, we would have to pivot all over again. And that is something that is right now seems to just be a bit too much of a problem for us to overcome. So those are just some of the issues that we run into that may or may not be a problem in other districts, and the reasons for that, and some of the things that we have been looking at. There are more things that we've been looking at, going from a 3-2-2-3 schedule instead of what is called a 2-1-2. There are many things, but we are not going to jump to anything. I just want to make sure that if we do have any staff that are watching, what we have found is that there has been some staff concern that when they hear we are investigating things, that we might be jumping to something. We just want to remind everybody that we've asked our staff sincerely for their feedback, for their suggestions, their ideas, their questions. It would be extremely disingenuous if we were to not thoroughly vet and investigate everything that's brought to us by our very competent staff. And that's exactly what we're doing. So the question about going full day, going half days, switching the number of days, when we say we are investigating these, we're investigating these because they were brought to our attention by our wonderful staff, and we want to fully investigate whether it is feasible, whether it's not. If it's not, explain why it's not, so that other minds can participate, different eyes can be on it, and perhaps think of things that we have been unable to think of. So we just want to make sure everyone knows we work on this every single day, and we're not going to stop until we are able to come up with something that works for our staff in our district, with our kids, with our situations and environments, because it is an extremely difficult process for our staff to be able to do everything they're doing for the children of Easton right now. But I don't want anybody to think that it is in any way compromising how much they care about your students, how much they are dedicating to your students. They're working harder than ever before. And I think most people know that we have one of the hardest working staffs in this Commonwealth to begin with. So we continue to investigate things. We'll continue to report out. We'll continue to monitor current conditions. But if I get to, for example, the governor and the commissioner's recommendation that everyone returns to school as soon as possible, if feasible, I will note the 3 items that were on the Mass Association of School Superintendents memo that did come out as challenges across the Commonwealth, and they are indeed challenges in Easton as well. The first one is space, and we've been talking about this for weeks now. We currently have 6-foot social distancing in all of our schools. The World Health Organization recommends 3-foot social distancing. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, recommends 6. And the Department of Elementary Education and the Massachusetts Board of Health recommend 3 to 6. So there is no hard and fast. However, like everything else in the district, we have tried to go either at the maximum or slightly over when it comes to protecting our staff and students. And so we have held firm to 6-foot social distancing. I can tell you that we certainly had hoped to be in a much better place when we drafted our first plan, which was back in July and August. I know of no expert, and we certainly aren't COVID experts, but I know of no COVID expert that could have said exactly where it would be, either now or in January. We were all projecting. We do still have a very flexible 5-level plan that we can move forward or backward at any point. We just don't have the metrics at this point to move forward. And we had said very clearly in our documentation, and we'll repeat, that our next phase involves 3 feet of social distancing. And there was a very specific reason for that. Our classrooms will not fit all remote students that want to return, and all of our students in cohort A and students in cohort B that want to come back. It just will not fit them. And so we are discussing social distancing this evening because, again, our first commitment was the safety of students and staff. We feel comfortable that we're providing that right now. If the school committee and or the community want us to move to 3-foot social distancing, then certainly we will work to make that happen. But our current plan has 6 feet. We have been successful with it. If we are advised to move in a different direction, then we would take that under advisement, and we will work on cohorts A, B, and the remote learners. But I just want to make it clear that when people are calling and saying that they want their students to come back in person, that it does mean we need to go less than 6-foot social distancing. I don't want people to think that there's plenty of room and we can bring all students back and have the same exact parameters in place that we do now. It does mean reducing. We did do a thorough audit of all of our buildings in the last couple of weeks, and there are minor exceptions where we do have a building or several classrooms spattered around the district where we could fit students in if we went to 5 feet or 4.5 feet. But almost every school, we would need to go to 3 feet in order to get our students in more often, or to have every student that wanted to return from remote learning into hybrid. So we are at a very critical point here. I did discuss it with both the representatives of the union, teachers union, and the cabinet, the leadership team, and they very much possibly more than anybody else, want to have all students back as soon as possible. But they also feel as though the 6-foot social distancing has given them the level of confidence of safety that they have had since the beginning of the school year, and would be concerned about reducing that. So that is where we're at. It is a crossroad, to be sure. I know there will be very strong opinions on both sides of this. And so we are looking for some community input. We're looking for your guidance. But we are in the phase that we feel is appropriate for us right now. But everyone is well versed in the upcoming phases, 3, 4, and 5. And so we are open for a conversation about that and seeing what the school committee recommends as we go forward. I also want to just make sure, for appropriate planning purposes, a lot of this requires consideration of daycare, childcare. And I want to make it crystal clear for parents. We do not, first of all, we're not going to make any changes before the new year. No changes will happen before then. But even after that point, I want to really make it clear that if we do take any remote students back, we may not be able to take all of them. At that point, we're going to be assessing interest, first of all, in December, but we haven't sent the survey out yet requesting that information, because I am confident it makes a big difference to a parent what the social distancing is in a school if they send their child back. Whether they're fine with 3 feet or not, I think it's important they know that before they make a commitment that we're asking them to hold to, because we're going to do an awful lot of planning and movement based on the feedback that we get from parents. So we just want to make sure everyone understands exactly what may or may not be happening, and that what we decide today can change tomorrow based on the trajectory of the virus, which is not trending in a very positive way in the town of Easton or in the state. We do have it under control in the district as of now. We do have plenty of research that the commissioner has passed on to us and to the public that it is not perceived to be a source of spread in schools. And we have data that shows we have not had school spread. So we're sharing all of this transparently, and need to have a conversation about how to move forward. The last thing I will say is that we did accommodate some, not a huge amount, but definitely some staff students to be able to attend cohorts A and B. If we are going to have the opportunity for some remote students to come back in the new year, we will need to revisit that. And students who are attending A and B, not high need students, because those students are purposefully placed based on their significant need. But for example, staff children or people who have made special requests would have to go back to either cohort A or cohort B in order to provide space for remote students who wish to return to the hybrid model. Or for other high needs students, which we are learning, through any school year, you identify more and more as a school year continues. And we need that space for our really neediest students. With that said, I will see if the school committee has any questions that I can answer or further information I can provide so that we can engage in this very important conversation.
Jackie, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you for that, Dr. Cabral. I just have a couple of questions. Do we know if we were to go to 3-foot distancing, would we be able to accommodate everyone back? Do we know if there's even space to do that?
There may be challenges for lunch periods, because obviously if students are going to remove their masks, they have to go back to the 6-foot social distancing. So we did discuss that in a couple of schools. They still are working through the kinks on that, and would need to find some alternative spaces as the winter months are coming, and it's going to be more difficult for them to use the outdoor spaces. So they need to overcome that issue. And there was one school that had maybe one or two, might be maybe one or two children shy in each room. However, after they assess the number of students that wish to remain remote, they may be able to work it out, but they need that extra piece of data, because we know we believe that there's always going to be a cohort of students that wish to remain remote. We just don't know that number yet. So if we just look at, if all the students come back, they may have a little difficulty, but we're hoping that when we find out how many people wish to return from remote learning, that it may help work itself out in most cases, if not all.
Well, that was the other thing I was wondering. I assume if we are going to at some point look at this, we would have to send out a new family survey. I'm assuming there'd be maybe some remote people that want to send their kids back, but there might be some families whose kids are in hybrid that they're not comfortable with the different distancing requirements, and so they may pull their kids out.
Absolutely, which is why we haven't sent it yet.
Yeah.
If the consensus is that we move to a 3-foot social distancing and we are asked to move in that direction, I think it is critical that parents know that before they make a decision, because I agree with you. There are going to be people that are not going to feel comfortable with that have their children in school now because it is 6 feet.
Right.
And so that's why it is very important that we hammer this out.
What about the busing? Because the busing requirements haven't changed. So right now, what is it? An 83-person bus can have 27 students. Is
Right.
there a concern that with all of this, how are we going to manage the busing as well?
Yeah, and that's actually number 2 on Mass's memo is transportation, but it's for basically all the same reasons. I didn't really get into too much detail about it, but certainly the social distancing is important. The one thing that helps us a little bit with transportation is the number of people who are currently transporting their own students, but also unlike classrooms, we typically don't have many siblings in the same classroom, but on buses, we do have children who live in the same household. And so they can sit together, obviously. And so that does help us a little bit as well. But that's number 2. The third item in the Mass memo about this, of course, was collective bargaining. We have 6 bargaining units, and they've been wonderful. We've been able to hammer out memorandums of agreement to get to where we've gotten so far. But obviously, if we're going to change any of the guidelines that we've been using, we have to discuss the impact. And there has to be an agreement on how to mitigate any impact on staff. We haven't had those conversations, so I don't know yet about that, but I do know that we have talked about it, and there are staff that are concerned about having more students in the classroom, for sure.
And that was my other question. Is there a concern that we'll lose more staff if we move to this model?
In terms of losing staff, do you mean resign, or?
I mean, for
I
any reason.
I don't know. I don't know that we would get an agreement.
Yeah.
I can't say either way, because we haven't had, in all fairness, we have not had this conversation.
Right.
But sure, it's possible we don't have an agreement.
And I do know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I looked at the, DESE has a spreadsheet of all the districts and what their plans have been up to this point. It was obviously done in the beginning of the school year, so it might be different now, but it looked like any of the public school districts in Mass that had brought their students fully back, whether it was for a particular school or the district, they were still able to maintain a 6-foot distancing in their classrooms. Are you aware of any other districts in Mass that have gone to 3 feet?
I'm aware of one in our region.
Okay.
And, we have statewide meetings regularly. We have cohort meetings. We have what's called roundtable meetings, which are larger swaths of the state. and we have regional meetings. And, you know, it's very different to compare ourselves to a large urban center like Boston or to districts out west who are very spread out in terms of landmass. So we typically discuss these with our regional partners, and I'm aware of one that's at 3 feet and another that is 4.5 feet or so.
Okay.
But the rest are right now are at 6 feet, but they're also engaging in these conversations at this time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping Mass Association of School Committees will do something on this soon, because I'm very interested to hear what other districts are thinking about at this point. Thank you.
Just to interrupt here, audience that are sending in questions into the Q&A, please put your name and address on your question, because we need to have that in our minutes. Okay, who else has a question? Go ahead, Jen.
Regarding the going to a full in-person day versus the shortened day that we have now, thank you for the explanation on the planning and the scheduling complexities. Totally understand that. What are you hearing from your colleagues in other districts where they are doing a full in-person day? How are they able to do that without having extra time for planning? Is it a result of their remote learning model being different and a lot more asynchronous learning and a lot, less of the live synchronous, kind of teaching to two audiences at once?
Yes, it varies greatly. So as you can imagine, we talk daily and we are investigating each other's, picking each other's brains, writing to one another, reading each other's plans. So we're pretty well versed in almost all of them. And I can tell you they vary widely. For example, one today was explaining, they're able to easily have their students in their cafeterias, for example. And the reason is that they purchased individual desks for all of their cafeterias so that they can appropriately distance their children. We don't have funds to do something like that. We don't have those kinds of funds, even with our grant money. So some people have resources that are very different than ours. When we have lunch tables to use, our students are facing one another. You can't turn them around. So we fit far less students in the same, perhaps, physical space just because of furniture, for example. Some districts, as I said, have purchased the platforms. Depending on what platform it is, they've had a lot of problems with the platforms. They've had problems with the fact that it is almost all asynchronous and they did not have that understanding. That also does not really allow for a student to be able to move back to hybrid if they need it or if it is desired by the family, because now they're not in a classroom. They don't have a teacher per se in the district. Same thing with having a remote teacher. Really only possible at elementary levels, not at secondary levels, but it does inhibit the opportunity for students to move back into hybrid if they ever choose to. They really need to commit to be in a remote model for the entire year. And one of the things we've seen this year is that we have many, many, many families that want out of the remote learning and they want their kids in person. They're seeing the social emotional effects that it is having on their children. They've been out of school for about 8 months now. And that is very different even than the 3 at the end of the school year. Or they're finding that they're just having more difficulty through learning through this modality. There are many, many different reasons for it. It takes away the opportunity to be able to service children in that way. Or if you have a learner who is now identified as having a need that is really difficult to offer online, occupational therapy, speech therapy, very intensive services, for example. it's not a model that allows them to now come into school. We also have students, our model, like I said, warts and all, it does allow for things that many other districts are struggling with right now. For example, students who are on quarantine. Our students are able to seamlessly continue participating in their classes right now if they're on quarantine. In other districts, you've got students out 2-3 weeks at a time, and they cannot participate because they have, they're in person, and now the only way they could participate, if they only have remote teachers, so to speak, they can't just join a random class now for 2 weeks and then go back to class. So they're having, not something that they predicted or even anticipated, but it is now a significant issue for them. And they're having students missing weeks and weeks of school at a time. That's an advantage of our system, for example. I mean, there are some advantages. Like I said, the biggest disadvantage is the number of students we can fit in hybrid, and certainly the taxing it has on our staff. But in terms of students, if we had larger spaces and we had more staff and we had more furniture, we could accommodate far more students. We just don't have that. We don't have that at our disposal, and some other districts do. So it really depends. Like I said before, it depends on the personnel in the district. You have to remember, we eliminated 30 positions last year. Those 30 opportunities of staff that we could have used in different ways that we didn't have this year. So we've got a lot of things stacked against us that other districts didn't have. And I still think we're providing an extraordinary education despite that. And our teachers are working very hard to make that happen. All of our educators, not just teachers, our administrators, service providers, paraprofessionals. It's a Herculean effort. But it's definitely not without issues. But we're finding it has made us far more flexible than many of the other districts are finding themselves in.
So for those districts that are, say, doing, a 2-1-2 hybrid schedule like we are, do you find that in the districts where they have a full day of in-person instruction on their in-school days, are they using, what are the students who are remote on those days getting for instruction? Is it synchronous? Are they using the facilitator model, or is that, it feels like that facilitator model is not unique to Easton, but it doesn't seem common. And so what I'm hearing from, the parents in other districts is, the remote learning days are often a check-in and then 2 hours of morning work and then a check-in, and then, which seems like it would be less burdensome on the staff, wouldn't require facilitation and maybe as much planning. So maybe that, I guess I'm wondering, in those districts, how are they handling planning time? Do they not have the same need for planning time that we do under this model? For better or for worse? Just wondering kind of logistically, how are they doing it?
Again, it's a mishmash. Okay. Yeah. So some of them, the teachers are not getting the same planning time that they've gotten before, never mind more. Some of them are planning for the work in class and planning the work outside of class, but just giving that work to the students and not working with them at all. Some of them had, as I said, had the pre-purchase programs. Some of them have remote teachers. But again, there are pros and cons to all of those. And it's almost impossible at the secondary level, because you certainly can't offer, every single, to think that you might have a nice pocket of kids that, that you have an English teacher who can work remotely, and you have exactly 25 sophomore English students that want to be remote. Mm-hmm. And those sophomore students who want to be remote also have all the same classes in common that they want to be remote in the rest of the schedule. It's almost impossible. You'd have classes of 2, and then in person you'd have classes of 40. So it's very difficult. We did try, I don't know if people remember at the beginning, I did try to work regionally with our superintendent cohorts to come up with shared staff. And so, you know, we may have students in a couple of different districts in the same math class or the same English class for the year. But again, we ran into some difficulty. We didn't find that we had a huge commitment or cohort of people who wanted to be out for the entire year. We were getting a lot of feedback that there were parents who were very interested in coming back either in January or in the second date, that's in the spring. It would have required a commitment, and there were just some barriers that really made that difficult.
Just to also alert you that some of the districts around us, their remote learning experiences are similar to that in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we committed not to do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I've definitely heard that, where, you know, you have students who are basically on their own for a significant part of the day. Yeah, with just a kind of a here's your packet. It's due by the end of the week or whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Chrissy, I know we have some questions on the Q&A. Do you want to begin those, please?
Sure. And just to reiterate, again, there are some great questions in here, but we cannot read them if you don't have your name and address attached to them. So I have, for example, an anonymous attendee with some good questions and some others. So please, I did type in responses to those people privately, asking for them to add their name and address. So the first is from Natalie O'Reilly, 10th Road Drive. This is a 4-part question, so I'm going to stop after each question. The first part, in the initial presentation, Dr. Cabral said that the DPH and DESE guidance allow for 3 to 6 feet being perfectly acceptable, and that it has been seen to date at that time that data is showing that schools were not super spreaders. And now DESE and the governor said last week outlined an expectation that schools across the state should have students attending in-person learning, and that most of the 351 cities and towns should strive to have students in classrooms full-time. What I loved most about your approach to the difficult scenarios our district was given, having to formulate 3 plans, was when you said, and I quote, "We have structured it in a way that we can move back and forth between the phases." Would you please, number 1, explain the structure you had in mind in the presentation regarding the ability to move forward?
Oh, you want me to answer one at a time?
I get. Do you want me to
That's
read
fine.
the whole thing?
No, that's good, because it seems like there are a lot if you're saying that, so I don't want to
Yep.
miss any. Okay, so first I will say, yes, all of that is true. I've repeated that all again tonight. That's all very true. We have been using the CDC guidance of 6 feet. We've been very clear about that from the beginning. I also stated again tonight that schools have been seen not to be super spreaders. That's true. We just don't know if that's because we're at 6 feet or if it's just because we're not super spreaders. We don't know that. So I'm just being transparent about all of that information before people make decisions. As far as the commissioner and the governor saying that everybody should be in full time, there will not be 351 communities that are in full time. I can tell you that confidently. I can tell you that very confidently. I am talking to those superintendents. There are many who are still there. We have superintendents that are still full remote. We have superintendents that are going back to remote. We have superintendents that are weaving in and out. We have some that, as I said, they have instruction for 2 days and then they do work on their own for 3 days. They are much further away from going back to in-person than we are. We are in a we're in a much better place than many districts. Admittedly, they will say that to us. I will say this, and if there are any regional superintendents, they can call me out if they dispute my characterization of events. But I was on a regional call and they were saying, "What on earth are you doing over there?" And I said, "Why?" And they said, "All we keep hearing about is how great it's going in Easton." And I said, "Well, not necessarily for our educators. They're having a very difficult time and they're working extremely hard. But yes, I will agree. The experience for our kids is much better than in other places. And they were asking us, you know, what are you doing? How are you doing? How are you getting this done? How are you doing that? And so I can tell you that it is acknowledged that what we have in place is much more flexible and very comprehensive. Now, when I say flexible, that is 100% predicated on the notion that we can change our social distancing. All of our planning involves that. So yes, we could easily move to another plan, but it requires a reduction of social distancing. And that's why we're having this conversation, because we need to know, are we at a point where we're going to be advised to move to 3 feet? So it is extremely flexible, but it's under the presumption we can move to 3 feet, which it does say in the plan very, I attempted to be very clearly, hopefully it was very clear, that it involves us moving to 3 foot social distancing. The governor and the commissioner were also very cognizant of saying, if feasible. And if you don't have the physical space, if you don't have the furniture and you don't have the staff, it's just not feasible. Now, I appreciate the compliment on the flexibility of the plan, but I have to say that plan, in all honesty, I never been hiding this, was done in August. And we had no idea if we would have a reduction in substitutes. We had no idea how challenging it would be for staff. We had no idea there would be a lag time in our computers coming in. We had no idea on a lot of things, and never professed to know that. As I said before, there's a page early in that document, and it is a full page disclosure. The COVID rules right now. And we have to follow along with what we are allowed to do. So could we move to another plan within days? Yes, we could. But it requires a reduction of social distancing. And I am not at a point where the leadership team and myself are advising that, but we are looking for where the community and the school committee is on that. So that's the conversation that we're having. So the structure on how to move forward is the phased plans that are in the back to school document. And it does state that our next phase is dependent on 3 foot social distancing. So the details of the plan are in the document. I can review them if you'd like, but it all is has to have 3 foot social distancing in order for it to work. And the CDC has not changed that. And I don't know if or when they will. If they had changed it already, we likely would have already moved. But that's what we're waiting for.
The second question from Natalie O'Reilly is, how do you plan to incorporate the governor and DESE updated guidance with regard to information?
So again, the guidance is just guidance. All they did was repeat to us what we know we want is for our kids to get in person as quickly as they possibly can while being perfectly safe. So it wasn't really any new information to us. We all want our kids back. We all agree that having them in front of us is the best form of education. Again, none of this is meant to be permanent. None of it was even meant to be a full year. And we don't know if it will be a full year. We still have no idea. So our intention is to continue investigating all of the ideas that we have. If we are aware of something that another district is doing, trying to see if that is at all feasible for our district, seeing what barriers are in place that we can overcome. Do we need to secure more funding? Do we need to try to find other staff? Do we need to get other resources? What supports do we have to give our teachers? And we've been doing that since the beginning of school. We're going to continue doing that. We're not going to stop. And so that's how we're working toward that. And until we find a way that we feel is as safe, number one, and isn't going to be more difficult on our staff, then we will certainly move to it.
The third question is, in phase 4 of your presentation, 3 feet, all students in person, How are you planning on scheduling lunch and staff for lunch?
On scheduling it,
Mhm.
well, there would have been less lunch shifts because they would be at 3 feet. So right now, even if we went to 3-foot social distancing, because of the CDC recommendations, I would still say I would not feel comfortable at all having kids at 3 feet eating right now. So we'd have to still go to 6-foot social distancing. That plan is if the CDC had relaxed that and we were at a place where we could go to 3 foot for eating and for social distancing just in classes.
The fourth question, in phase 4, 3 foot, all kids in person, how are you planning on incorporating planning time for the teachers?
So that phase in our plan, if you review that plan, it is 3 foot social distancing for a full day. So it's the regular schedule back again. And so if kids are in at 3 feet, we can fit almost every student. Then we could greatly change how we provide the remote education. It's possible we would only have a few classrooms, depending on the number of students, that still had remote learners. So we could cut our facilitators in half or less than that. Our specialists would be able to teach specials full day instead of facilitating. It does make a big difference in the number of students we can have in person. Every time we bring more students in person, it's less that are remoting in. So it changes the model significantly.
And then Natalie O'Reilly concluded in saying, if none of this is actually possible, I'm curious about why it was presented in the summer as a plan that we could easily pivot back and forth between phases, and yet it appears that it's not possible at all.
Again, we can pivot at any time if social distancing is reduced. If it isn't, then we have to continue with the structure that we have. We can't fit more students into spaces that are not big enough.
Okay, the next question is from Allison Daly, 32 Deborah Lee Lane. And Allison wrote, I hear these issues that Dr. Cabral speaks of in reference to Easton's major barriers. I, however, feel that we as a community were required to submit a phased approach to reopening. We are now here well into month 2 of hybrid learning. It has been documented that there have been no transmission of COVID-19 within our district. My understanding is that this was the point we were waiting for to proceed to the next phase. What are the metrics you mentioned you were waiting for to proceed to 3 feet? Will there be another survey sent to parents and staff about comfort level of 3 feet, given there are sources that document 3 feet being adequate? How will you make the decision to move to phase 4 with 3 feet?
Okay, thanks. So all of those metrics are in the plan. They're also in our back to school playbook. We take into account community spread outside of school as well. And as you can see, not only in the country, not only in the state of Massachusetts, but in Easton itself, our rates are increasing. So we go by many metrics. Now, just because Easton is increasing doesn't necessarily mean that we either have to stay put or go remote. We purposefully use the combination of matrices because it is possible that what is happening outside of school is not happening in school. And we are at a place of confidence right now in safety. All of that is true, and I said all of that at the beginning of the meeting because I completely agree with you. There are some things that we should be aware of, however. One is that we are increasing right now, and we in fact are having more cases than we did at the height of the pandemic in the spring. We're also about to enter a season that is both dry and cold, which has been attributed with exacerbating the spread of COVID. We are also entering several holidays, and we are well aware that we have a lot of people in our community, including our school community, who plan to travel. And so we're concerned about that. We also know that there are a lot of people that are going to be getting together with family and friends over the holidays, and that does increase opportunities for risk. So there are a few things that are coming that are concerning. Can we say that they will absolutely cause a problem for us? No, but we're putting them out there because I'm trying to give the pros and cons to all of this so that everybody has the most information possible when making recommendations. And again, as I've said before, when we ask, you know, which is first? Do we have a low rate because of what we have in place? And if we add to it or change it in any way, it increases? I don't have an answer to that. But that's why we have these minds together and we get input from the community. It is something that with what we see coming in terms of the temperature, the seasons, the travel, the families, the holidays and so forth, the flu season and whatnot, that we feel more comfortable for the safety of our staff and students maintaining the course. However, that again is the point of this conversation. And so yeah, thank you for bringing up these points. I think they validate what we've been discussing already this evening. And we need to determine as a community how we're going to go forward. Oh, you said something about surveys, sorry. So the surveys, yes, as I said earlier, this conversation is very salient to the survey. I cannot expect any parent to give us a true indication of whether they want their child to return to school or not unless they know what that is going to look like. So we just need, what I'm looking for is to continue this conversation, feel as though we're in a place of mutual agreement so that we can confidently describe what the experience would be like in January going forward so that people can make an informed decision for their family. I will say one change that I would recommend is we did talk about students who are in remote model who want to return coming back on January 4th, which is the first day of school after the winter break. I would actually move that forward to the Martin Luther King week of January 18th. And I would do that because of the anecdotal information we received about the number of people that will be gathering and traveling. It's sort of an embedded 2-week period, if you will, sort of a quarantine before we add a good number of students to our school community. But again, those are things that we learn as we go along. I would be very distraught about anyone who's in a constantly evolving situation who didn't continuously learn from what is happening and evolve their thinking as they go forward. And so that's what we're trying to do. I realize what we wrote in August. I'm very cognizant of all of the details of the plan, but it behooves us to be cognizant of the most recent research, statistics, and information and move along with it. And so we will be recommending, yes, in some cases, there will be changes based on information that we have now that we didn't have then. And I think it's very important to stay abreast of that information and to make it part of our evolving plan, really for the safety of everyone.
The next question is from Kitty Williams, 86 Lincoln Street. With many students attending both cohorts, why can't we move to 3 feet? Schools are not super spreaders. That's the first question. The second question isn't related as much, so is it different?
I think I just answered that. If they're looking, if that's not satisfactory, I would encourage the writer to maybe write a more specific question. I believe I just answered that, and that may have been in the queue before I was able to answer that.
Okay. The second question is also young learners on IEPs. Why are some offered 4 days and others denied? There is a reason these children are on IEPs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely, that's true. But there is a huge, huge spectrum of needs on an individual education plan. Some involve, for example, a very small amount of services that can very effectively be done online. Some of them are very intensive and need to be done in person. So we have very competent professionals who review the IEPs and make recommendations based not only on the students' specific needs, but also on their level of progress as they go through the year. And they recommend, based on that information and a great deal of data and ancillary information to make those very decisions about which students need to be in person more often than not. One IEP is very much not the same as another IEP. They're very, very different.
The next question is from Shannon Sunty, 358 Bay Road. Is there an update regarding laptops for kindergartners?
Yes. Now, I will say that due to the worldwide shortage and labor disputes and all the other things that are happening on international level, we do get very nervous about announcing things, but we do currently have 1,200 units en route for a Monday delivery. That would be for our staff and Chromebooks for the 3 to 12 students who don't have them. We also have 500 touch screen units en route for a Monday delivery for our grade K and 1 students. We do have an extremely, literally the smallest technology staff in our region, literally the smallest. And they will need, I mean, think of 1,700 pennies scattered on the floor. That's a lot more than most people conceptualize. We have 4 people, not even all full-time, who are going to literally everything from open every box to log it, assign it to someone, give it a code, a barcode, load information, make sure it's working, load programs. It is going to be a great deal of effort on their part. We actually asked the cabinet today to please ask staff to be very kind about putting in help desk tickets for the next couple of weeks, because we all know that it is a priority to get these devices into student and staff hands. And so they're going to be preparing those computers for the next couple of weeks, and people will be contacted as soon as they're ready for students to take them home. They're going to be delivered to each school, and children will be taking them home and staff will have them. We did, full disclosure, have to make one concession in order to make this happen. That is, we had originally ordered 14-inch monitors for staff because they just have a much different use. They need to see a cohort of students and so forth. In order to get them before February, we had to go with an 11-inch screen. As we are able to get 14-inch devices, we could potentially swap them out and have other students use the 11-inch screens, but we felt it was very important to get those devices. It's been quite a hardship not having them at this point in the school year. And so we are looking forward to a Monday delivery. Please understand, people will not be getting them Monday. That work needs to be done. We're not going to wait till they're all done before they go out. They're going to trickle out as they're done so that people can begin using them immediately.
Katie Williams, 86 Lincoln Street. If private schools can be up and running at full capacity, why can't public?
Well, a lot of the private schools are at 3 feet. Again, that's our biggest factor right now, which is why we're having, again, this conversation. They also have funding at their disposal, perhaps resources, rooms, people. We don't. Its biggest thing, honestly, is the 3 to 6 foot social distancing.
Nick LeBlanc, 6437 Robert Drive, South Easton. When will surveys go out to parents to gather feedback on returning to school with the 3-foot social distance?
Again, as soon as we're able to determine what exactly we're going to be doing in January. I think that's very important information in order for them to be able to make that kind of a commitment.
Then he asked, just to be clear, we are waiting on the CDC to change their recommendation from 6 feet social distancing to 3 feet before we could safely bring students back full time, ?
Well, not necessarily. This is up for a school committee discussion, but we're answering these questions first. So I'm hoping to have a robust conversation about this.
Natalie O'Reilly, 10th Row Drive. Will students and families that travel and/or have gatherings for the holidays larger than 10, as governor mandated, be required to stay remote for 14 days?
So we are, yes, we are asking, it's in our playbook. Again, on our district website, on the left-hand side of the screen, it says district playbook. In the 20s, slide 20 something, we do have travel guidance in there. We are asking anyone who, I mean, it's honor system. There's no way we honestly can know, right? So we're asking for our civic responsibility, our social responsibility to one another, that anyone who comes back from a state that is considered a high risk state, or if they're coming from out of the country, that the student quarantines for 14 days. Yes, that is what we're asking for. Staff, we believe that our staff is following the necessary protocols. We're asking them, the governor's order says that a test can be taken 72 hours before returning to Massachusetts. We don't see the medical merit in that. And so we are asking staff to take a PCR test upon returning to Massachusetts. And then once it is negative, they can return to school.
Actually, Natalie said, edit, will students and families that travel and or have gatherings of more than 10 people as governor mandated not be required to stay remote for 14 days? Thank you. So that we are asking them to stay. The travel is what we're asking. We can't monitor the gatherings larger.
I don't know if someone has a gathering of more than 10 people. So we're asking them, if you do this, this, or this, can you please have a 14-day quarantine? We can only rely on the honor system for that.
Beth Gaylor, 9 Day Street. I have 2 questions. Please read and answer them separately. First, can you tell me what percentage of classes at the high school have facilitators?
No, right now I cannot, because we have had several classrooms where the teachers at this point have decided they no longer need the facilitator. And so that is a constantly moving number. We could get that number for you, but I do not have that right now because it's changing daily almost.
Second, again, just for the high school, has any consideration been given to staying with the hybrid model, but doing a full day that is not fully in person? For example, on a Monday classes, could there be normal non-pandemic length and students could attend them in the hybrid model for a certain number of blocks? Students would go home at lunchtime, and then all students would be remote for synchronous classes the remaining blocks in the afternoon. Classes could rotate as they do during normal times. So the same classes are not fully remote every day.
We can't just extend all the classes because we would have to extend the school day. Right now, there is a 1 hour lunch/travel period in the middle, which means we have to reduce the minutes in our classes. We can't, contractually, we can't have a staff day with unpaid break time in the middle and then add to the end of the day, and we can't afford to add any time to the end of a school day. So contractually, that's not something we can do.
Okay, we have 2 more questions so far. Christy McDonough, 14 Cedar Drive. Would it be possible to require students and staff to undergo a COVID test before return to school after a vacation period?
We can't require anything unless we are able to provide it and pay for it, and we are not able to pay for it, no.
And last question so far, Nick LeBlanc, 6437 Robert Drive, South Easton. Oh, another one came up. Instead of continuing the discussion, can we send surveys out asking Easton residents' parents about these items, like the 3-foot distancing? Who participates in the discussions? Surely not all parents can participate. Can we start to collect survey data now to get a feeling of what residents' parents are comfortable with?
Well, you have representatives here, elected representatives that are supposed to represent the constituency. I know they're contacted often by people, and so that is why it is an agenda item, and I'm looking to get their sense of what the community's input is. That's why it's an agenda item. I'm hoping to have this conversation with the school committee so that they can advise us. That is their responsibility, and I know that they have been contacted quite a bit about this topic and others.
Mike Duffy, 178 Washington Street. When we started this, I don't know why I'm laughing, but you'll hear at the end. I asked if kids were really going to be required to stay home if they have a runny nose. It was said that we should use our judgment, but according to self-medical screens, it says that kids with runny noses should stay home. We are in a runny nose season. I just bought 40 cases of tissues. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, so it's usually a combination. If you look at our playbook, there's actually 2 columns. One says if you have one of these symptoms, the other one says if you have 2 of these symptoms. And I believe runny nose is in the 2 symptom category. So I would check the playbook again. I can't tell you off the top of my head what slide it is, but it's definitely in our playbook, which is on our district website. So it shouldn't just be one symptom in isolation. Unless, of course, I mean, if a student has a runny nose and they were recently near someone who had COVID-like symptoms, that is obviously different than if not. But generally speaking, we have classified symptoms between 1 symptom and 2 symptoms, because some, to your point, I believe, are more serious than others. So I would just check that list again.
Allison Daly, 32 Deborah Lee Lane. Although I would like to see both my K and 2nd grader in school full-time, I'm still most concerned with our pre-literate kindergarten learners. Many towns have made it so they are back in person 4 to 5 days per week. 3 weeks ago, I did ask about our tuition for full-time kindergarten students in Easton being prorated. I'm very concerned that there has been no conversation with parents about the expected tuition for services not currently being delivered.
So yes, we too are concerned. We did have a conversation with our elementary staff, and earlier I discussed some of the impediments that we're still currently working on trying to rectify. In terms of the tuition, we are still paying our teachers full-time because they are working full-time, and students who are attending full-time are attending full-time, whether they are learning remotely through the computer or having work from the teacher, but they are covering the entire curriculum. The tuition directly pays our teachers. So half of every kindergarten teacher's salary is paid with tuition. The other half is paid with the operating budget, usually. This year, we've had to pay more of every teacher's salary out of the operating budget because we've had less tuitions. If we do not collect the tuitions, then we will have to eliminate teachers, which means the classes will be a lot larger and we will have even less room to have them in person. And that's not the direction we're looking to go. We're trying to, your first point, get as many of our children in person as possible. We are well aware that a lot of the education for our littles is very physical. And so, but we want to do it safely. So we are still covering the entire curriculum. The teachers are still getting to everything that they typically get to. And so for that reason, we consider ourselves still offering a full education. Even if they're not physically in the building, they are participating remotely when they are not physically in the building.
Those are all the questions right now.
Thank you, Chrissy. Michelle.
A lot of what I was going to say actually has been covered. And I'm still trying to get numbers from my district, but the person I need to get them from is out on quarantine. But just in general, from the perspective of a teacher, and in a district that is not adhering to the protocols that we are adhering to, I think that we're very fortunate in Easton to have these strict and firm protocols of the 6 feet, and the way we've structured our day and how we are making sure that the students have a full day of education, but in a safe way. Because if you're changing the way you're thinking about it and you're going to 3 feet, things can spiral out of control very, very, very quickly. You know, and I was looking in the minutes tonight from 10/22, Dr. Cabral mentioned that at that date, the next 6 to 12 weeks, we're going to be potentially really bad. And we're seeing those numbers go up daily. And that brings us to mid-December. So I'm breathing a little easier to hear that we might not be looking at this until January and maybe even mid-January, because you talked about a 2-week quarantine period from after the holidays. It may be true that as of right now, our students are not super spreaders, but our staff are still in the building, and our staff is still, going to the grocery store, going to the bank, doing the things that they need to do as these numbers rise. And I'm going to give you an example from my building, and this happened again this morning. I personally went in to cover a grade 1 lunch, and the kids are eating in their classrooms, which we are doing in Easton. And there's 16 kids in this class, and because their masks are off, we find out that there's one child who's positive. All 16 students, the classroom teacher, the math coach, the reading coach, which is myself, and 5 specialists all went into a mandatory 14-day quarantine, whether we were negative or not, and our families. And if the numbers are going up and those types of situations are starting to happen, then all of a sudden you have situations also in my district where you have schools with 18, 20, even up to 30 staff members out at any one time. And then to try to cover that, it's just not sustainable. And then the kids are not getting an education, the staff is stressed. Now you're shutting down schools because you don't have coverage. An example, 6 feet. So if you take one student and you have 4 people 6 feet around them, you're talking with one positive case, 5 students and their families, and that's not even staff members. You start putting kids at 3 feet, you've gone from 5 students and their families to 9 students and their families as the numbers are rising. And I think maybe people don't realize that one positive case triggers the 14-day, if you're considered close contact, a 14-day mandatory, regardless of if you're negative at any point. Between the coverage, the rising numbers, I just cannot see in my head going to 3 feet at this point, because I've seen how badly that can spiral out of control, and we're living that daily. I don't know, that was just my comments. A lot of the other points I was going to make up have been covered.
Caroline.
I really appreciate that real life example, Michelle, of how things are going in another district where they have not followed the kind of safety protocols that we have. We've said really continually through this process since the spring that the virus will drive our decisions about what model we adopt for our children. And I know that people keep talking about what we planned in August when we developed the model. And I know Dr. Cabral just talked about all of the unforeseen sort of challenges that have occurred since August when those models were developed. And it's true that we just had no idea when those models were developed of all of the challenges we would face. But in addition, that the virus honestly would just become increasingly out of control. I mean, that, I think we were optimistic, we were hopeful that we could actually move from phase to phase. But the truth is the virus is literally out of control right now. And in fact, Dr. Fauci, among many others, scientists and epidemiologists, infectious disease specialists are saying that they expect the virus to reach a true peak in mid to late January. So even the notion of looking at January, moving to say 3 feet and bringing more kids in, to me seems just out of reach. Now, this breaks my heart. I know that there have been comments on social media about, old people like me, not possibly being able to understand how difficult it is for parents with their children at home, you know, half remote, half in person, or maybe all remote. I do understand. I mean, I have 2 grandchildren that are in a hybrid model in Connecticut. And, you know, when they tried to reduce the spacing, sure enough, they started having outbreaks in the high school. So they had to go all remote for 2 weeks. And it looks like that might be happening again. Every time people pull back on the safety protocols, it seems like there are consequences. It may take a few weeks, but those consequences seem to follow as night the day. As Dr. Cabral kept sort of pointing out, it's quite possible, in fact, probable, that it's because we have the more extreme protocols in place that we haven't had, knock on wood, so far, significant spread in the schools. And it's simply not true to say that you know, no infections can be spread in schools. It is true that schools are very rarely the source of infection, in the sense that people are coming into our schools, people that haven't been following safety protocols, quite frankly, in their own homes. They're the people that are bringing the infection into the schools, but it doesn't mean it can't spread in the schools. Of course it can. It can spread anywhere. And in fact, there have been discussions of mutations that seem to be indicating that the virus is actually becoming more infectious. So getting back to what Dr. Cabral emphasized, you know, repeatedly, our primary goal has been to keep people as safe as possible. There's no such thing as safe. There's safer. And right now, I think our schools and our model are safer than they would be with 3-foot distance. That's kind of what I have to say for now. I really think that January, given the projections that are pretty much everywhere and, about the infection, is just an unrealistic goal in terms of bringing more kids back. It's heartbreaking. It's frustrating. I mean, I do understand that this is enormously challenging for families, and my heart goes out to them, and of course for kids. But I just, you know, again, the virus is going to be what drives these decisions. And that's about it. Thank you, Nancy.
Did I see somebody else's hand up? Okay. So Dr. Cabral, you said that you were looking for input from us as a school committee on this.
I'm sorry, I think Jen had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jen, didn't see it. Go ahead.
That's okay. And Nancy, if we're going to give some input, I don't have a question. It's more along the lines of input, so I can give it now, or if you wanted to say something and then go around, whatever makes sense for you.
Yeah, whatever you know, go ahead.
Okay. So I really appreciate the perspective that Michelle brings, working in a district that has different protocols than Easton does. And I think that's, it's so valuable to hear what's happening, you know, in real life. And I hope people understand how much more disruptive the virus has the potential to be, even in cases where it's not necessarily spreading, but just getting that one positive, case, apologies for that, happening, you know, and having that many more families, you know, students, their families, staff, and their families have their lives upended and disrupted for 2 weeks at least, with the possibility of, as Michelle has gone through in her district, having to have entire classrooms go remote. I know you spoke a couple of weeks ago about how you had a substantial portion of the staff in your school under quarantine. So I hope that people understand that we're thinking not just of the student, you know, a student possibly spreading, but also how incredibly disruptive it can be if there are more people within that close contact range who would have to undergo a quarantine. I also want to speak a little bit about another environment that has had some issues with spread happening because of people not following a 6-foot wearing mask distance, and that's the hockey community. So we have another example of a substantial population where there were protocols put in place, and it seems that spread was happening, not necessarily on the ice, but from players in locker rooms where they were masked, but certainly by no means anywhere near 6 feet apart, and people socializing at the rinks, again, wearing masks, but not not a substantial distance from each other. And there were several documented cases of events where there was spread that, also affected school communities, because you had, most of the youth hockey, you have players who are going to school, and then all of a sudden, all of their close contacts at school were affected as well. So with that, I'll say that, I have 2 kids who are in this model, and it's not great. One of them is really struggling and asks, can I go 4 days? I can't do this. I hate being at home. Can I please go 4 days? So I 100% understand that. And I want nothing more than for my kids and their classmates to be back in school full time. But I also share the concerns about the time of year that we are thinking about. And so cold and flu season, holiday season, it just seems like a really, really unsafe time to be considering getting less strict with the safety protocols that we have in place. So I wholeheartely agree with at least getting through the holiday season, the end of the calendar year, and then, it's November. Things are changing all the time. Maybe the outlook will look different. Maybe we'll have more data available to us in a few weeks or in a month. Maybe there will be more districts who adopt less than 6-foot distancing, and we can see how they go. There might be an appetite in some places to go ahead and do that, but I'm just, right now, I can't imagine us reducing the distancing protocols that we have in place, given the information that we have, given the concerns about the time of year that we're running into. Just seems like a really bad decision if we were to head in that direction. But I'm hopeful that with more data, with more information, with the passage of time, that we will be in a place, maybe in the new year, to look at, can we do this safely with shorter distancing? I mean, I'm extremely, extremely hopeful that there would be some good data to back that up. And I just feel like we don't have it now. And I absolutely echo the Mass Association of School Superintendents concerns. The 3 things that they brought up are 100% valid, that, we need more proof that shorter distance is safe. We need to figure out transportation and the other concerns. There's just no way to move ahead right now without those areas addressed. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And the other thing I was just going to comment on, and this has been since last week when Governor Baker made his, or 2 weeks ago, when he made his announcement about, sending kids back to school 3 feet apart, but then saying no gatherings over 10. To me, that was like, what are you talking about? So I agree with what everybody said. And I think in January, maybe after, like you said, Martin Luther King Day, after that, maybe there'll be some more data and we can really, embrace getting everybody back in, because right now I'm still nervous about it. So, Caroline?
I just wanted to thank Jen for kind of sharing her personal story, related to her son. I have a 14-year-old grandson who is struggling enormously with this model. He would love to be back in with his friends full time, but he understands, as does his mom, who's a teacher, by the way, that in order to even have the 2 days a week in person, that they need to keep good solid protocols in place, or they may end up with everyone having to go back to what it was like in the spring, which was horrendous. I mean, I think even those parents, there are many parents who are talking about the fact that their kids are in the hybrid model now. They recognize that it's not ideal, but they would not be comfortable if we went back full-time in person, or if we, had went to 3-foot distancing. So they would be forced to take kids that they feel, their own children that they feel are benefiting from those 2 days a week in person. They would be forced to pull them back to full remote. So those kids end up with not even half a loaf. So it's, far from ideal for any of the groups, the full remote, the hybrid, and kids that, are able to go full 4 days a week, or even 5 if they're very high needs. But I just think that at this point, it's sort of the nature of compromise. It's not ideal for anyone. But at least it's something for everyone, kind of based on need and circumstances. But I do think that even January, I mean, heaven knows, if we do have a vaccine and it's deployed more quickly than we imagine it can be, and it's more effective than we imagine it can be, there's a lot of promise out there, but I seriously doubt that by January, things are going to have slowed down significantly. Certainly that's not the prediction. The prediction is that mid to late January is going to be the biggest peak of all. So I think you're right, Jen, we don't have the data yet to make a decision about moving to another model.
Okay, thank you. All right, does that help, Dr. Cabral, or you all set?
Yes, yes, that is our recommendation, but certainly we are interested in your input, and as representatives of the community, what your sense is. And it seems as though we are in alignment.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So now that moves us on to discussion of snow days. Dr. Cabral.
Okay, this I don't think it's a very long conversation. This is not a vote or anything. It's more of a point of information. Again, what to many people seems to be a very easy decision, and unfortunately is not. The question is whether all snow days will be considered remote learning, and therefore no snow days need to be made up at the end of the year. I understand there is a lot of conversation nationally, not just in Easton, certainly, about the importance of maintaining snow day traditions for children, for sledding and playing and that sense of wonder. And I have to say, I don't personally subscribe to that. Most of the children I know play remote games on snow days, or sleep in, or watch TV. So I think many of us are sort of nostalgic for our experiences on snow days. Certainly any Saturday or Sunday or after school, they can get out there and do the same exact thing. I don't think that's really the argument here. I am more concerned with the fact that Easton seems to be some sort of magnet for electrical outages and downed trees. And to be perfectly honest, it's not just Easton. We have many faculty that live in outlying districts as far away as, Rhode Island, up north of Boston, and out west. And it would be very difficult to assess who has power, who does not have power. And without power, certainly there is no remote learning. So you could have huge swaths of the population that are not getting in a school day while others are. Contractually, that's a problem. You can't make up the day at the end of the school year if you don't feel as enough people did get work done, because you have people that did work. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to get away from the 4 a.m. wake ups, potential snow days, I think it needs to be an individual call on each day. If we have some sort of event that is well predicted, it is you know, it's a day where everyone has power, but the streets aren't cleared yet, or the schools are not ready, and it's possible it can be a remote day, I can have that conversation with the leadership team and we can let people know that. But to say that every school day will be remote, I think is unrealistic for Easton in particular. And so I think it is going to remain a call at the beginning of a day, hopefully the day before. Of course, we always try to let people know the day before because it is a hardship. There's no question about it. But as unreliable as COVID is, New England weather is just as fierce. So unfortunately, I think we're going to stay the course and do call days as warranted. In the rare occasion where we might have a snow day that we feel as though we can do remote learning, we certainly will discuss that and let people know ahead of time. But barring that, we're just going to have our typical snow day, Twitter calls, school messenger calls, so forth, and school will just be canceled.
Caroline?
Having difficulty unmuting, and I accidentally closed my video. Anyway, I hadn't really thought about the electrical power issue. So on Wednesdays, when we're already, you know, it's a designated remote day except for a small number of children, would the power outage situation be taken? I mean, would you still have a snow day essentially because you do have, you know, that small number of children coming in typically, but also because of the concerns about power outages?
Those days are different than our other days right now. Those, everyone knows that's going to be a remote learning day, and the teachers prepare a little bit differently for those. So I think we'd have more success with those being remote learning days. But again, that's why I think it's important that we make the call at the time based on the day of the week, if we're even still in this model, based on the day of the week, the weather, the electricity concerns, and so on. It's definitely a different day than the other days, though. That is true.
Right. And we've already had 2 Wednesdays this year that were, I believe we lost power to different parts of town. So
yeah, in fact, we talked to the leadership team today about substitute plans and making sure that people are prepared so that they have alternatives for children. And we're working on all of those things.
Good. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. District update, Dr. Cabral.
Okay, so I don't have much because the bulk is the COVID work that we've been doing. I did want to let people know that we do have the ticker, if you will, on the main page. You do have to click on it. It's right at the top of the main web page under the reopening plans. And people can see based on every week how many cases we have in the Easton Public Schools. Right now, there are 3 on there as reported as of yesterday. We decided to use the same definition and metric that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is using to avoid confusion or conflict in any way. So the definition is at the top of the sheet. People can click on it. I fill it in every week, either very late Wednesday or first thing on Thursday. And people can look for further information if they click on the link at the bottom of that page, which is to DESE, further information in terms of separating out student and staff cases. We don't do that on ours. We just put the total number of cases, but that is separated on DESE. Right now, all 3 of our cases have been students who contracted it outside of school. And it also lists every other district. So for comparison purposes, for example, if someone wished to look at all the communities in the state, they could do that on the DESE link. There are also a couple of other links down there that we think are helpful or important, so people can use that as well.
Okay, that's it.
That's it for the cases. The BINACs, we had discussed contracting with the state on free antigen testing for COVID. However, we did really vet that very thoroughly, and in consultation with the Department of Health, the Board of Health, and our district nurses, we determined that the details of that plan in terms of who administers the tests, how people are notified of results, follow-ups and things like that. We just didn't feel like it would work right now for us. And honestly, none of our region's neighbors are doing it either. We require the PCR test right now because all antigen tests, including the ones in this study, need to be followed up with a PCR. And so we didn't want that to be confusing for people either, thinking that they could take the test and be all set. They still, even according to the study, needed to take the PCR. So we just decided to continue with our requirement of the PCR test. So we will not be doing that. And then finally, just a reminder, but someone asked this earlier, but just to repeat, we are asking anybody that is traveling, if you are going out of country or if you will be traveling outside of the lower risk states identified by the governor, that if you are a student, you quarantine for 14 days upon arrival in Massachusetts. And if you are a staff member, you get a PCR test upon arrival in Massachusetts and can return to work when that test is negative. And Mrs. Pruitt is, she can update you on her visits when she speaks. And then finally, of course, I just wanted to make note that our, we are extremely grateful and humbled by the services of our veterans. Yesterday, of course, being Veterans Day, we had programming in our schools, very different based on obviously developmental levels, course content, subject, and so forth, but certainly wanted to be especially thankful to all of our staff members, our students and former students, and our community members who are veterans, and thank them for their service and their sacrifice. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Public comment. Chrissy, are there any more questions? Go ahead.
Yes, there are. So the first is from Allison Daly, 32 Deberly Lane. Response to K question. If the financial need for Easton is so great with regards to needing the K full tuition from parents, I'm curious why there wasn't an option for full-time in-person K learning. Why wasn't this a priority for not only financial, but also due to the high learning needs? I do think the Easton's rates of K enrollment would have been drastically different. However, instead, our community private kindergartners are full and 5 days per week.
It's the same answer. We don't have room for all the students and to maintain 6-foot social distancing. We don't have the space. We need to reduce our social distancing to do that. And in terms of comparison to private, I understand they're there. I would argue quantity is not necessarily quality. I'm certainly not going to disparage any of our colleagues, but I am very confident in what our students are receiving and using the Massachusetts frameworks appropriately, whether it's online or in person. And I am confident, especially our kindergarten teachers are absolutely doing a phenomenal job. And I'm confident in what our students are receiving for full-time kindergarten.
Jennifer Troy, 200 Bay Road. We know some local private schools are at 3-foot social distancing. Have any of those schools had issues, COVID spread at 3 feet? Are we assuming 3 feet isn't safe without any data to support it?
I would say that the biggest piece of data right now is the guidance that a close contact is anyone within 6 feet. Therefore, we are putting more people in close contact by definition if we reduce it to 3 feet. That is a very substantial data point.
Katie Williams, 86 Lincoln Street. Will younger students be considered a priority to get back in full-time versus high schoolers due to the fact that it is much more difficult for our young learners to remote learn?
Yeah, I would actually say that I've had many people argue that it is just as difficult for our older learners, not in terms of the technical aspect of it, but in the social emotional aspect. However, the priority is for all students. We did investigate the full day option for elementary first. We are doing that now for the middle and high school as well, but we've never abandoned our investigation of how we can offer that for all students. And we won't. We're going to continue working on it. We don't have the answer yet, but we haven't stopped and we're not going to stop. We're going to continue finding ways that we're able to offer enhanced services for our kids with the number one priority of safety, and then the education that they're receiving. But again, I'm very confident in the education they're receiving right now. It is not ideal. Nothing compares to being in person. I said that before we even started, and several people were upset with me for that, but I maintain that to this moment. We need our kids back in school. No one's going to tell me anything differently than that. I would never support anything that says anything different than that. As of right now, we do not have the space or staff for that, but we will continue working on problem solving. It just means we don't have the staff or space yet. And we're going to keep working until we find solutions that are appropriate.
Before I read the next question, there is a second question, again from anonymous attendee. Just to remind everyone, I cannot read the questions unless your name and address appear. So if you wrote this question and you're anonymous, please share your name and address so I can read the question and comment. The next question is from Nick LeBlanc, 6437 Robert Drive, South Easton. I very much appreciate those who spoke on the topic of returning children to school. However, all I heard was the first person opinion of those individuals. No one spoke on behalf of the communities they serve. My children are struggling. Many children are struggling. I am struggling. Other parents who need to work from home are struggling. And based on the data I have personally reviewed and what has been shared tonight, I am more than comfortable to send my children back to school with 3-foot distancing. I would like to know how parents like me can be heard, because I do not believe my views were represented in this discussion.
So in terms of on the school department side, I have tried to represent both the pros and cons of how it is represented to me from my observations of students, my conversations with the bargaining units, with the staff, and with the administration. And so that's what I share in this meeting. In terms of the community, that is the school committee, and they reflect what they hear from the community. And many people I know have reached out to them, and you certainly can do that as well. And they can speak from their perspective. I just speak of the perspective of the school and the viewpoints I've brought forward this evening.
Jackie?
Thank you. Yeah, so I just wanted to address that a little bit. It was really just a couple of months ago that we sat here trying to decide what model to do, whether hybrid or fully remote. And we had received a lot of information from parents that they felt that we should do fully remote. And we listened to our parents, we listened to our administrators, we listened to our teachers, and we looked at a lot of different data points and realized that we knew the children had been struggling in the spring quite a bit with the learning, with the social emotional aspects, that the families were struggling. And that's why we decided to go for hybrid. We felt that that way we could bring the most kids back and keep our kids and our staff the safest under that model. We do hear from parents all the time. We're parents, we have kids in the schools, we know parents are struggling. We know the kids are struggling. This is definitely not a perfect situation. We have heard, I have heard, I'm sure other members too, have heard from parents that are comfortable with 3-foot distancing. And I've heard from parents who are not comfortable with 3-foot distancing, that feel much more safe sending their kids in the hybrid model with the 6-foot distancing. So I understand that it's frustrating right now for a lot of families. It's frustrating for us too. And we're going to continue to look at this. We're going to continue to listen to what other districts are doing. If they have suggestions on how to go forward with this, we're going to look at the data. And we encourage you to keep reaching out to us too. And we're just going to try to do the best we can to keep our kids and our staff safe and get the most kids back that we can as soon as we can.
And then Jen, you had your hand up.
Yep, I echo a lot of what Jackie said. I also just want to remind folks that this new information from the governor and from DESE came out just last Friday. This is the first time that we as a committee have been able to meet to discuss this. Open meeting law prevents us from having offline discussions. So what you're hearing and seeing tonight is really our first crack at just talking about it, hearing from Dr. Cabral, you know, what the feedback is from her cabinet and from the staff. Certainly, you know, some of us do have kids in the school. Even those who don't are very much embedded as in part of the school committee. And, you know, we read discussions on social media, people reach out, you know, through personal connections. I would encourage anybody who has comments to, you know, if you know somebody personally and want to reach out and share, please do. Otherwise, please email us. And that becomes, you know, those emails become part of the public record, and are something that, you know, that we can really see and respond to. So we definitely, you know, we're all elected. We represent the community as thoughtfully as we can. And we certainly want to hear from you. This is all very new though. So as mentioned, this is the first time we've been able to discuss this. It's when these kinds of things come out, it's not like we can huddle up. We're not allowed to do that. So I just want people to understand, again, that this is very new and this is the first time we've had the opportunity to talk to each other about this and to get feedback from the district administration on what the thoughts are of the professionals working in the district and educating our kids.
Thank you. Michelle, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Chrissy, continue on.
Alyssa Janes, 401 Depot. Have we considered having K2 going full-time? This type of learning is more feasible for older children.
Yes, I'm not sure if this, I'm sorry, I missed the name, but I'm not sure if this person is just joining the meeting, but I would encourage you to take a look at ECAT and go back. I did talk about specifically some of the roadblocks that we have come upon for PK to 2. We're not finished though. We're going to keep investigating those and try to look further on how we can maybe get over some of those issues. We certainly, our goal is to get kids back in school safely. There's no question about it. I don't want anybody to think we've given up on that. But we have some issues that I discussed earlier in the meeting, and I would encourage you to take a look at that portion of the meeting. But yes, we have considered it. We continue to consider it is the answer to your question.
Natalie O'Reilly, 10 Thoreau Drive. The survey at the end of the summer reflected nearly 1,000 families that wanted full-time in-person education. I strongly encourage the school committee to at very least consider the wants and needs of the parents and kids. 1,000 families. We want to be heard in order to have 3-foot distance. This is a reflection of what we want. Please advocate for what the community wants.
So I would just say what we presented was the hybrid format. We did not give an option for full day return. So that was for the hybrid format. And we are in the hybrid format. And we understand people want to return. We want to return too.
Allison Daly, 32 Deborah-Lee Lane. A survey if people are comfortable with 3 feet distancing ASAP would be a good first start. This way we could know if it was even something we could bring up again. Please, could you share your emails?
So if you want the school committee to share their emails, that is a public records request, and you certainly can do that. I think the town website explains how to do that, and they can get that for you. You have to be very specific about what you're looking for, though. And then in terms
It's right,
of,
I'm sorry, the email addresses are right on the website.
Yeah.
the town
Under school committee. Yep.
on the town
Okay.
website. Oh,
No.
they're
Yeah,
on
I
our
think
website.
she
Sorry.
meant our email
They're on our
addresses,
website.
not
Oh,
the
okay,
content
'cause I
of
was gonna
emails.
say that's
Yeah.
a very big
Yeah.
request.
Right.
Okay, yes, they're all, just so you know, if you know their names, it's the first letter of their first name, last name, and then the suffix is the same for everyone, @Easton www.k12.ma.us. But as Chrissy noted, it is on our, it's right on our website under school committee.
Yes.
And was there another question?
The survey.
Oh, can you read it again? I don't
A survey if people are comfortable with 3 feet distancing ASAP would be a good first start. This way we
okay.
would know if it was something we could bring up again.
Sorry. Yeah, we could survey people, but if we don't have staff in the building, it's not gonna, there
Or
won't be staff in the building.
transportation.
I'm sorry?
Or transportation.
Yeah, if we don't have staff working in the buildings, if we don't have buses to bring our kids to school, people can say they want to wear no masks and sit right next to each other all day long, and we will not be able to provide the education. So it's not so simple that we can ask one group of people. We have several groups of people that we have to work with to make something like this happen.
And there is a comment, but I can't read it because the person didn't put their name or address.
And I understand when people say that kids are suffering. I think it's really important. This is a very difficult thing to say or to be accepted as a comment, but I think it's very important for people to take a look at the structure they have in place for their children. So for example, if somebody's trying to work from their home while their kids are in the home and they're struggling because they're not having somebody help them with the computer, that is a very real issue. But the only solution, there's not only one solution to that. In going back to school is not necessarily the answer, especially if it's going back to school in a model that may not be the safest way to do it. We have had families that have decided to sort of be quarantines, and they're helping one another with things like that. We have gotten the YMCA and Maplewood to have areas set up where they have people supervising children. They keep them in the same cohorts that they are in our schools, and they use the same safety protocols. I understand these things cost money. There are waivers for people who are experiencing difficulty and scholarships, not just waivers for people experiencing difficulties, but also scholarships that people can apply for some of these programs. I encourage you to check those resources, but we can't presume that school is the silver bullet to that. And I'm not saying that people are misguided in their concern. That is not what I mean to say at all. Again, I will repeat myself. The best place for children is in school for the regular school day. I will never dispute that. However, it is not necessarily the one answer to situations. And, you know, there are small learning environments with the cohort, with people supervising. It's not ideal, but this world is not ideal right now. We're not in a normal world right now. And to expect school to be normal is, unfortunately, it's an unfair expectation in our current reality. We're doing the very best we can, I assure you.
Allison Daly, 32 Deborah Lee Lane. Thank you. My question was about a survey to evaluate if 3 feet was even something Easton community as a whole wanted. I'm aware that my views may not be that of others, specifically educators. I'm not requesting no masks.
Right. Okay. As far as a survey, we can survey parents, but all I meant by that was, and the mask, I was not asserting anyone's belief on that. I just meant regardless of what that is, we have to have other things in place in order to have children in school. And, you know, we have 6 bargaining units that we need to bargain with to make sure we have enough people in school. There are just many other factors involved. And I just don't want to be disingenuous. We could do a survey, but if we do a survey and literally 100% of the people say 3 feet is fine, I can't guarantee that that means we can get back in school. We still have to have procedures in place. We have 587 staff members that we have to account for. We have transportation issues. We have facilities issues. It's not as simple as if parents want to come back. And perhaps we will do a survey. I certainly will talk to the leadership team about that. I just want to make sure, again, I don't want to mislead people. If there is a survey, if it's overwhelming or not, it's not the only factor in consideration. If I don't have employees coming into the buildings, and I'm not asserting that's what they would do, I have not had the opportunity to bargain with them. But that is a very important part of this picture. Very important.
Maria Picanzi, 5 Wedgewood Drive. I agree with Allison Daly. A survey is a start with 3-foot distancing. Great idea.
Okay, thank you.
And that is if the school committee is interested in us seeking that information right now, that's something that they can ask us to do, and we could pull together a survey. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Are you asking me? No, certainly.
I'm just in general.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
If the school committee if that's something they would like us to look into.
Caroline?
My concern about creating a survey that sort of is focused on that particular question is it might imply that this is sort of like a vote, that, and as Dr. Cabral has pointed out, there are many factors that influence even the possibility of moving to a different model, or that could create a constraint on moving to a different model. But also, I think a number of people have referenced the fact that we need more data at this point. And we also are in the midst of a wildly out of control pandemic. So it hardly seems like the time to kind of imply that if enough people express an interest in 3-foot distancing, that we would, be heavily influenced by that opinion. Again, I think all of us are very sympathetic to the enormous challenges that are involved in both the hybrid model and certainly in fully remote. And I think everyone has said repeatedly, we know this is far from ideal, but right now we have a raging pandemic and it's getting worse by the day. And lots of people are saying, I know the governor said that we really shouldn't even include people who are outside our own households in Thanksgiving and other holiday celebrations. I don't think anyone is taking that seriously. Well, quite honestly, my husband and I are. We won't be seeing our children or grandchildren, but I think a lot of people are saying, but it's been so long since we've been with our families, and this is such an important time of year. So I expect, given the evidence from other similar situations, that the infection rate will spike 2, 3, 4 weeks after Thanksgiving, and then spike even more after perhaps some of the other holidays. So I just think that it isn't necessarily helpful at this point to say how many people are willing to go to 3-foot distancing, because that's in an ideal world where we wouldn't be facing all of these other challenges, most of them specifically related to an out of control infection rate. So that's and I understand that is not the rate in the schools. And I agree with Dr. Cabral and others that it's quite possible that the reason the cases have been very low in the schools is because we have put such a focus on safety protocols. But I just think it would be, to have a survey right now would imply that, well, what the heck, if enough people say they want 3-foot distancing, let's just go to 3-foot distancing. But I think our priority has to be the health and well-being of our children and our staff and the rest of the community. Sorry, I sound like a broken record.
We have 2 more comments.
Go ahead.
Nick LeBlanc, 6437 Robert Drive, Southeastern. Before you do all the work bargaining and wasting time trying to figure out how to do transportation and get more staff into schools, can we start collecting data to see if parents and other groups are even interested in moving to 3-foot distance? We can be very clear that there are many factors that influence this, but this is one data point. If every parent says no, they don't want it, then we don't have to waste our tax dollars and time bargaining and discussing the issue. Let's please start collecting data from residents.
I just want to be clear that we talk to many residents and hear from many residents. I don't want people to think that we have completely dismissed the views of residents. We're aware that there are a lot of people that want to move to 3-foot distancing. We get that. There are at least the ones that contact this office, a lot more people that want to stay at 6-foot distancing. I do not encourage you to contact this office because it's very difficult for us to get back to the number of people that are contacting us. But with the at the risk of infuriating my bosses, I would say that you really do need to reach out to the school committee. That's what their job is to collect this information, and they want to. So that's exactly what you should be doing. I believe me when I say they get hundreds and hundreds of people contacting them regularly about this, and not just to go to 3 feet, but the opposite as well.
The other thing too, I'm just going to interject here. All of us would love for every student to be back in school right now. All of us. We would love it. And I think Jackie talked about this earlier, that to make our decision when in August, I believe we made it up, or yeah, I believe it was August, about whether we were doing full remote or hybrid or whatever. You don't even understand how I don't know the word, but it was a trying time. So if we could snap our fingers and say, okay, everybody's back, 3 feet distance, we would do it right now. We have to proceed with caution.
And I just want to note, I have talked to representatives of unions. I have talked to staff. I have talked to my administration. Nothing would be easier for those people right now than going back in person, no remote, full time with their students. I don't know if there's one educator that would not want to do that. They are longing for that. This is the hardest thing our most seasoned veterans have ever done before. But representatives of these same people are telling us that they do not feel comfortable in this current climate moving to the 3-foot distancing at this point. So there's no selfishness there. Believe me, there's not self-serving in any way. So this is not something we're just talking about in a silo right here. We're trying to bring in as many representative views as we can. And I represent 587 of those views. And we have alternating views within our own group. There's no question about that. But there's definitely concern. There's definitely concern.
Maria Pacanzi, 5 Wedgewood Drive. If the goal here is to get children back in school, isn't the 3 feet distance one of the next steps to do this? If this is not, please explain what your proposed steps are to get students back.
That is the next step, but I would make one correction. The goal is not to get students back in school. The goal is to get students back in school safely. And we do provide safety right now. I believe we do provide safety right now. So that is the goal. And as I said earlier in the meeting, we're looking at many different iterations and ways we can go back that are even different than jumping right to the next. We're looking at sort of phase 2A, 2B, 2C even before we get to phase 3. Are there ways that we can still provide distancing and provide more in person? We don't have to go right from what we have to 5 days full in person. Are there ways we can move even between that we never thought of before? And as I said earlier, we are continuing to work on those and explore all of these possible iterations. But they do involve many factors, and it's what we work on daily. I would say 95% of my day, every day, right now is COVID-related issues. And we will not stop working on it until we find things that work better for our students and for our staff that are safe.
The last one so far, Lauren Loomis, 4 Abbey Road. I take resent from Caroline saying she and her husband are the only ones taking the governor seriously. There are many, many families who are taking the virus seriously and have and continue to miss out on a lot. You are just listening to a small sum of people who want full day all day.
Okay, all right. Caroline, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I gave the impression that I think that we're the only ones following. Of course, many, many people are listening to the governor and taking seriously his advice. And it is easy to fall into the trap of reading about all of the people that, well, just today we're saying that the airlines expect to have record numbers for this year at Thanksgiving. So there are obviously an awful lot of people that are planning to travel, and that creates risks of its own. And I'm sympathetic with people wanting to meet with, to get together with their families. Boy, am I sympathetic. But I didn't mean to be dismissive of other people that I know, or many other people that are taking the advice equally seriously.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Superintendent notes.
No, I have none.
Assistant superintendent notes.
So since the last time we met, we had our professional development day on November 3rd. I just wanted to update you on our professional development day. It was a success. We had very similar to what we did during the 10 professional development days prior to the school year beginning. We had sort of a menu of options for our educators to participate in. First of all, we did have our paraprofessionals participate as well, and provided them some professional development in regards to facilitating. So that was great. We actually had some of our paraprofessionals actually providing the training as well, which was great. So it's great, in my opinion, to really, it's wonderful to have speakers and things like that, but we also learn best from our peers, and we have so much expertise within our own district that it's great to monopolize on that. So during the professional development time, we started the day off by meeting in grade spans, PK to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 through 12, where the participants had an opportunity to talk about the actual model, the hybrid model that we are currently in. They also talked about, for what are some things that are working and what are some things that might not be working, but providing solutions to those things. So we have been looking at those documents. They actually had templates to fill out. There were great suggestions. Teachers were really collaborating and sharing great ideas. And the feedback we had from that portion of the day was how great it was to hear from other people within their grade span that they might not necessarily work with regularly. So that was great. We then had grade level meetings and department meetings where you had an opportunity to be more homogeneous and talk more specifically about what is going on currently within your grade span or within your department, and troubleshoot and brainstorm. We also provided some technology professional development. So at the start of this, we had some professional development on some of the new things that we were working with. As for example, Cami is a product that we were working with, as well as Pear Deck and Seesaw. These are all platforms that are being used currently by our educators. And this professional development was focused on getting a little bit more in depth now that they've had time to use it and focus on it. So there was great attendance, and obviously in those sessions, there were great questions. And we also followed the EdCamp model again for our secondary teachers, where they were able to have times to discuss topics that they were interested in during this time and this teaching model. We obviously gave them time to plan and explore some of the professional development that they were in. That has been really a common thread, which I will share with you in a moment when I talk to you about my observations that I've been on or been conducting. And so that was great time for the teachers to participate in that and actually have time to collaborate with their facilitators as well. And then we ended the day having school breakout reflection meets where the schools actually met together and shared their thoughts on the day and how things are going. And then we also throughout the day, we had our adjustment counselors on call for any staff that might need time just to kind of share and vent and take care of their own social emotional well-being. This is a very trying time for everyone. And I really appreciate the comments that, you know, that parents are feeling and that they want their kids back full time. And, you know, that's everybody wants that. But we, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, that we're all compromised. And, you know, we need to also make sure that we're not just taking care of our children, but also taking care of our staff. And that has been something that we've been really committed to. And we want to ensure that we're taking care of them and making sure that they feel supported and safe. Which leads me to my my journey that I've been on for the past 3 weeks. And I wish, no, I don't wish. Tomorrow I would have been ending that journey. However, one of my appointments this week was postponed to next week due to a conflict that, however, I have been observing classrooms in this model. I have been traveling from school to school. By tomorrow, I will have been in 20 classrooms. My observations are not just a 15-minute span. Actually, I did have one that was 20 minutes because it was an RTI group and I participated virtually. The teacher asked me to participate virtually. The others have been from a period at the high school to 2 to 3 hours, spending time in classrooms and really understanding the model. You know, we provided the framework and the teachers are actually, they are executing the model that we planned for. So I think it's been very important for me to go into the classrooms and see it in action, see, you know, some of the things that may not be working well. What can we do? You know, thinking about what are those low-hanging fruits and what are those things that need deeper change, and really being able to come up with a plan to support the teachers. And not just by my observations, but also by my conversations with educators. And they have been instrumental. I have all my notes on my phone that I will be documenting and putting into a report. I also want to have time to share that with our leadership team, as they also have so much insight as to what's going on in the schools. So one thing I just want to share is that while we know, and we have been talking at length about the difficulty that our staff, that this has been on our staff, I also just want to share that this isn't easy for our kids either. And I know that we've been hearing about this over and over again through what parents have been saying, but it's not easy for any kid in any model. And I really want to note that. I will say that, yes, this model is difficult for our young learners because they don't have the independence. However, watching them do a dance that the teacher puts on for a movement break and having them participate, I would say, to make a generalization, most kids in the primary grades, I should say, K-2, are participating. We do have some kids that are not participating. However, teachers have made adaptations. So during one of the Google Meets, yes, a girl had her Barbie doll on her lap and was playing with her hair, but she was still participating. So just like educators do in the classrooms, and the adaptations that they make in their classrooms, they're making as they're watching their students at home. And we do have concerns. And like Dr. Cabral had shared before, I really want to make a plea to families that for our youngest learners, they will still need your help. But I guarantee you that this model, you have more time to do your work if you're working from home than if you were in a different model. And I'm talking from experience. I am a parent. My youngest child in his remote learning does his work in an hour and he is done for the day. And that is it. So I have been a part of these models. I've been in these observations where these children are participating and they are for more than an hour. And it is something that they're getting much more than I know from other districts are getting. And while they might be in school for a shorter amount of time during the day and going home, our teachers are still engaging with our kids afterwards. So it isn't just that they're done for the day. And I know we have talked about how it's more difficult to get some of our younger students, or actually all of our students, back online at the end of the day. But these are things that we're continuously practicing. And then lastly, I also just want to share that, which will become part of my report, is I remember when in 1998, I walked into my first grade classroom for the very first time. I was 23 years old. I didn't have a family at the time. I mean, I had my family that was in New Jersey, but I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I had nothing else to worry about but myself. And I had to learn how to teach, but I was handed a guide. I was handed the wonderful Fountas and Pinnell reading program. I was handed the Turk Investigations program. And I was actually participated in training where people actually practiced these models and taught me. I had a coach saying, oh, actually you should do that and that. What the teachers are going through right now, they don't have that. They don't have that to draw from. And so they are outside of school, not just having to replan everything, they are recreating, and they are also have their own families to tend to with their own children who are in school trying to learn in a hybrid or fully remote model. So I just want, these are some of the things that I will be placing into my report, because our staff, that I have to tell you, they're miracle workers. They really are. Well, tomorrow I'm going into 2. So the 18 classrooms that I have been a part of so far, I have seen exceptional things going on. And I've been able to say, hey, I see this in this class working. Let's talk with this teacher because you might connect and be able to share those practices. They are recreating things. And the other thing about our staff is they're perfectionists. They want everything to be just right. And they know what they can do and they can't get it done right now. And so they're frustrated. They're also worried about their own safety. And I just wanted to share that. But they are putting on that amazing happy face so that all of our children are attended to and are being educated in the best way that they know how. So I ask our community for some acceptance, that no child in any community is getting the full education that they need right now. We are in a global pandemic, but I am confident that in Easton, our kids are getting the best that they can right now. So thank you. I'm off my soapbox. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Chrissy. School committee notes, Caroline.
I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Michelle,
I don't have any tonight.
Jackie.
Thanks. So just a little bit, I had the opportunity to visit Miss Ventry's and Miss Ruska's classrooms at Parkview last week, maybe. So I wanted to thank them both for inviting me in. And I just want to give you a little update on what I saw while I was there. Classrooms definitely look different. It was very odd to walk into a classroom and see just desks and not tables, and the desks were so far apart and the books were all put away, and I was not properly dressed for the weather in the classroom either. There are a couple of organizational details that I thought were very helpful. And again, this is in a K-2 school. There were magnetic hooks on the sides of the desks, which I thought was very creative. So kids could hang either their jackets or their backpacks. And Miss Ventry had this really cute checklist on a piece of construction paper for every kid about everything they needed to bring in each day, which I thought was very, very innovative. It was definitely a little disconcerting, you know, when a child wanted to pick out a book, Miss Entry had to walk him to the back of the class and have him point to the book. She would get it for him. There just wasn't the same, obviously, interaction that you usually see in a classroom. The technology piece was a challenge. There was a delay in the start of the class because they were waiting for kids to sign on. And many times there would be an empty chair and the teacher would try to reach out and try to bring the child back into the classroom. And there were also, glitches where screens would freeze. Each classroom had a facilitator, and the facilitator's role was larger than what I would have expected it to be. I think it depends on who the facilitator is in the classroom. But in the classroom, one of the classrooms that I observed, she was helping the kids answer their questions and checking in and making sure their projects were done when they were doing some independent work. And again, I'm sure that just depends on who the facilitator was. I also noticed that the larger the cohort in class, the more difficult it was to keep the physical distancing, whether it was in the classroom or walking outside the classroom at a mask break or even in line going to PE. Both teachers showed me the amount of prep work they had to do each week, and it is really quite substantial. I thought both teachers did a great job of keeping their kids engaged and kind of calling them back in when they started to drift. But I definitely felt a level of stress in the classroom that I've been going into classrooms since my son has been in kindergarten. I've been volunteering in classrooms. So I've been in multiple different classrooms many, many times. Again, just as a parent observer, certainly, but there was a different feel. There was a little more stress. There was a little more rushing back and forth, trying to get the laptop positioned so that the kids at home could see what was on the wall, answering here, turning around, seeing if your kids behind you had any questions. It was a lot for them to juggle. And I understand why this is so difficult for so many of our educators. And I give them a lot of credit for doing the best they can under these circumstances and keeping our kids going. I'm glad I don't have to come up with suggestions like Chrissy does because I don't have any. I don't know how to make this easier for them. I wish I did. I wish I had a magic solution. But I do want people to know that the experience of sitting in the classroom and watching the teachers work, they are working. They are really, really working. And they are doing their best to keep every child engaged, whether the child is in front of them physically or on a screen. So I'm hoping to be able to go into a couple more classrooms if I'm invited. So, but I wanted to thank Ms. Ventry and Ms. Reska for allowing me to sit in their classrooms and see all the great work that they're doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Jen?
I also had the privilege of attending a class invited by Ms. Rogers and Ms. Carroll, Center School, 2nd grade. And I apologize if you can hear my birds in the background. They're getting loud. I attended, the request was for me to attend the hybrid, the remote portion, and to just be a silent participant to get a sense for how that works. And I attended sort of the first chunk of the day from when the students start until about 10:15. So it was about 45 minutes. And I have to say it was a fast moving 45 minutes. There's an awful lot covered. So Mrs. Rogers and Ms. Carroll have a long-standing relationship, so they co-teach very seamlessly. As Jackie mentioned, the role of the facilitator, I think especially at this age, is far more involved than I think what we had imagined or what may be the case for the older students, where it's really more of being sort of a tech support and a connection. Where, in reality for the younger kids, it was very clear that that the class benefited from the fact that Mrs. Rogers has a strong instructional background. She was doing a lot of work that, picturing somebody maybe without an instructional background wouldn't have had the same deft touch with the students. You know, she has that great teacher language, right? With getting a kid to, you know, put down their glasses or get back on the chair or listen to instructions and things like that. So very much the kind of reminders and refocusing that a teacher, you know, would do in the live classroom. I was very impressed with how engaged the students were. Now, granted, I had them fresh, right? It's the start of the day. I would imagine as the day wanes on, you have, you know, a lot more fidgeting or students struggling to engage. But the students who I saw participating, you know, it was really, it was, I was just incredibly impressed by how well the lessons, there were a couple of things in that time were planned. The amount of energy, how smooth it was to, we're going to pull up this story, listen to the story, great back and forth between the students who were in the classroom and the students who were at home in terms of being able to answer questions and give feedback. It was all just very well done, but it had commented, and I'll share my comments with the rest of the school committee, I'll forward the emails, that they made it look easy, but we know it's not. They do a great job of pulling this off, and there were some technical difficulties. The classroom teacher went off screen for a little bit, and it's just a roll with it. No, you know, everything just, oh, we've got this and we know what to do here. And really, really smooth, well executed, well practiced. But again, you'd know how much prep it takes to have that, even just the 15-minute timer pop up for, you know, the end of the session, and we're going to come back and have that smooth and ready to go, and to have this video clip ready to go, and that song ready to go, and this book ready to go. It was a ton of bing, bang, boom, including a discussion, including doing, you know, an exercise. And to have cranked that out in 45 minutes, and then have to do that multiple times a day, every day, it's just astounding how much content they're able to cover, you know, using different media to different audiences at the same time. Very, very impressive. But I think my biggest takeaway again was that, you know, that team benefited from having a facilitator with a strong instructional background. And I'm curious to know if all of the younger, all of the K-2, you know, if there's enough staff, sort of specialist staff to do that, or if you have some people who are filling in who might not have the benefit of that instructional background. So just something to kind of, you know, I was curious about, and we can, you know, talk about later, maybe Chrissy, when you give your full feedback, you know, report out to everybody. And that's all I had.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, go ahead, Caroline.
Sorry, I just did want to provide a little clarification regarding what Dr. Cabral said about contacting us, the community members contacting us. Typically, you can actually email the entire school committee simultaneously if you wish, but our actual policy is that the chair responds to emails from the community in general. At times we get emails that are sent also to the superintendent, who typically responds in those situations. But I didn't want to leave people with the impression that, you know, if they email each of us, they'll get 5 different responses, that would be, or all of us, they'll get 5 different responses. Nancy, I hope you don't mind, but I will say that is, you know, our policy is that the chair speaks for the committee. The rest of us are not really supposed to speak for the committee.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, I have a few things. First of all, along with Jen, I also got to observe Mrs. Rogers and Mrs. Carroll. Just as Jen said, it's amazing what people are doing, teachers are doing, and juggling, and, you know, it's technology, it's, you know, and parents see this at home when they're monitoring their children while they're the little ones especially. So that's tough. This past Saturday was the MASC annual meeting, and they had it on Zoom this year. So there were 10 resolutions, 5 passed automatically, and 5 there were discussions about them. So, you know, about everything from attendance in class during these remote days, and all the way up to whether MCAS should be given for the next 2 years. So some lively discussion. It's very interesting going to any of these MASC meetings because the people are from every part of the state, and it was very interesting. I believe there were 150 delegates there Saturday. Also this week was the Frothingham Memorial Corporation meeting. Jackie told me there'd be one a year, so I was there and it was very good, and a lot of updates at the park. They have a new tennis court, they're redoing the basketball courts, and things are moving along nicely up there. Hopefully we'll have graduation there in June, so we're going to keep our fingers crossed. Fall sports, great. I thought it would be a COVID hotbed, but it has not been. Boys soccer is undefeated. Girls soccer did really well, 5-1-5. Field hockey 9-0-2. Cross country, over 100 students participated in cross country. Golf was 9-3, came in 4th in the Hawks. So a really good showing for our kids, and such a good outlet. You know, speaking with some of them and their friends and things, they really enjoyed. That was like a ray of sunshine in the middle of this COVID thing. Tonight, Mr. Craig Goldberg he presented the senior projects. The kids were doing the introductory, their introduction to their project tonight. Unfortunately, we're here. We all got invited. We could not go. So good luck to those seniors. He said it will be made available, that we'll be able to watch that. I had a question maybe for Chrissy or Alicia. On October 28th, DJ Henry Day was at the high school. How did that go?
We actually, it went very well. We actually have a debrief meeting on Monday, so it would probably be better for us to get back to you at the next meeting. I just want to make sure we represent all of the feedback that is provided. We had a meeting last week, but unfortunately it was canceled. So we will debrief with the entire team on Monday, but I will say it went phenomenally well. But we will provide you details after that meeting. Just want to make sure we don't leave anything out of the representatives who wanted to share.
Thank you. Now, committee, I have a question for you. Today is November 12th. We have our meeting. We are scheduled for another meeting next Thursday. Then we are scheduled for a meeting December 3rd, which I had requested be moved from December 10th because I was supposed to be on vacation, but that was pre-COVID. So my question is, should we have a meeting next Thursday? Should we change December 3rd to December 10th, or should we just leave December 3rd where it is? I need some input from you. What would you like to do?
Nancy, remind me again why we changed from the 10th to the 3rd?
Because I was going to be on vacation.
Oh.
And is that the only meeting we have in December?
Yes. And so we have tonight, we have next Thursday, and then yes, the only meeting in December is December 3rd.
So maybe we should move it back to the 10th so there's a little more space.
Oh, that's what I was saying. Let me just double check one more time. School committee.
So just so you are aware,
yes, go ahead.
Those are parent teacher conferences.
Oh, right. The 10th
The
and 11th.
Oh, so those got moved. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the OA conferences are the 19th. I managed to schedule mine all for earlier in the day, so I don't have a conflict, but in case any members of our audience would want to participate in a meeting next week, I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that our next meeting is December 3rd and the November 19th meeting is canceled. Do I have a second?
Second.
Caroline, what did I do wrong?
You didn't do anything wrong. I just wondered if anybody had a concern. I mean, I know there are a lot of sort of unanswered questions from the community standpoint in terms of, what our next steps are, and as we gather data, how that influences our thinking. So I'm just thinking December 3rd, I mean, I think we should do what you're saying, but keep in mind that it may be possible that changing data, information about COVID, et cetera, might require that we add an additional meeting somewhere in there.
And we've been doing that
Right,
since,
right.
we've been doing that since March. We've been adding meetings
Yeah.
in left and right.
Yeah.
So just for now, I'd like to just cancel the 19th, keep the 3rd, and go with that. How's that sound?
Yeah,
Great, I'll second
would-
that.
would there be any
We can always
appetite
add another
for,
one in December if we need to, right?
Say that again, Jackie?
We could always add another one in December,
Right,
Yes.
right.
Jen?
wondering, is there, because I share Caroline's concern, it's a 3-week gap at a time when information seems to be coming out left and right
Okay.
from guidance. I know that week of Thanksgiving is the halfway point between now and then is early the week of Thanksgiving. Now, granted, Thanksgiving will look very different for most of us this year, but I'm wondering if there's any appetite to tentatively schedule something for early that week, maybe like the Tuesday of that week.
Of thanks, like the
The
24th?
24th, yeah. That would be roughly about a week and a half. It'd be about a halfway point between now and the 3rd. Just wondering what people think. Or we could just go with the 3rd and then schedule something if there is, substantial
Improvement.
info. Yeah.
What does everybody think about that?
I like
Well-
the idea of the 24th. We can always cancel it if there isn't
Right.
significant data.
Okay,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is that we could schedule it, and then if there doesn't seem to be any change or anything significant to talk about, we could just then cancel it until the 3rd.
everybody's good with that? So we have to vote, right?
Yep.
All right, so I make a motion that we move the November 19th meeting to November 24th, and then the following meeting is December 3rd. And if any other meetings need to be scheduled, we would do that in a timely manner. Do I have a second?
Second, O'Neill.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durance, yes?
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, and then I want to thank Lynn, Joe from ECAT, and everybody that goes into making this possible. And also, as we head into executive session, which I'll make that motion in 1 second, I just want to wish everybody, students, family, faculty, everybody, have a happy and safe Thanksgiving and follow the rules. Okay, at this time, I'm going to make a motion to enter into executive session to discuss strategies for negotiations of Unit A and B, paraprofessionals, food service, custodial, secretary, and clerical. And we will not return. And in my opinion, having this discussion in open meeting would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the school committee. Do I have a second?
Wiseman,
Second.
second.
Okay, all those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durance, yes?
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thank you. So that's it, and we're not coming back. Okay.